Like I said,
later. There's no attic here,
if he
so I
ever
can't
wore a
really-
trench coat, I'd be like, I'm not hanging out with you today. So that's great.
It's like louder by staring at it for some reason.
God damn. Why'd you... All you have to do is hit it one time, like, normally.
All right, well, hold on. So I'm going to pass this to you.
Yeah.
I'm
Dungeons and
gonna
Dragons
I'm
style?
gonna let the two drummers call this meeting to order.
Together, my son.
Aww.
1,
Ebony
2,
and Ivory.
3.
Chris, such wonderful
was a very
tone got
balanced
pulled out of that gal today. All right, so this is our first roundtable podcast, and what that is that pretty much we've all been having this sort of conversation and doing this thing via Zoom and phone calls and in person in the before time when that was a thing. And at late night, Denny's and In-N-Out meetings or Buffalo Wild Wings or whatever other fine fare we chose to engage in that evening.
You never fail to mention Denny's when you do this anecdotal intro thing.
Yeah.
Denny's always pops up. I'm like, well, we should talk about them sponsoring us.
Because we don't have norms. I mean, we have IHOP, which I fuck with, and we don't have Waffle House, so it's pretty much Denny's.
Dude. Fuck IHOP.
Yeah,
fuck.
IHOP is overpriced and there's eggs are shitty.
Hey, they could be a sponsor in the future. So.
Yeah, really, like,
IHOP, your pancakes are bad.
you might be a one-timer, but we're going to be delicate about our IHOP slams.
Right. So,
I don't care.
Great slaps.
Great slams.
this is something I wanted to talk about today, because, we've already kind of talked about this.
Trump hands.
No, hold on. I'm going to stick them in my pockets, because I don't want to do it.
It's going away.
This is the greatest round table.
Better than ever. All our beautiful years. Beautiful years.
I wanted to talk about
pizza dough.
So when we learn songs for different groups, or like we're writing or whatever, or just having to be tasked with learning a piece or writing, there's this weird area that I've called blue, which is basically just blue to me is like if you were trying to explain what that color is to somebody who had never seen it before, they wouldn't know how to describe it. Like you wouldn't know the words to basically put on it. But like someone who's seen it before, it's just, hey, what's blue? Oh, that's blue.
Blue.
Those snares are blue at the moment. And that's like learning a piece, really. It's like you ask somebody to learn the details or absorb what an actual song is. Like there's more to it than usually like what's on the surface. And so you know about that, and you know about that. You definitely know about that. Max as well. So I don't know. I wanted to get you all. I ran out of steam.
Max
Sorry.
as well.
That covers everybody.
I've counted.
So yeah, I don't know. I wanted to get your take on that. If you've ever thought about that before, how you approach that. If that metaphor checks out with you.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely had these conversations plenty of times.
Yeah.
Blue it's weird. Blue is weird. It's for me, blue is more like more like a feeling kind of a thing. Like it's not something that's just more heard. It's something that's just more felt. Like when you hear a part and you need to know how to play that part, it's more than just the notes of a shuffle. It's actually digging into the space and nailing what the feel is of the song. And that's just, one particular example for me. If somebody doesn't understand how to emulate a feel or change a feel, but they know the notes, but you say, give it a little more of this kind of feel. If they don't know what that is, you can't really do anything about it. It's just the notes are the notes. And that to me is, all that goes into what blue is.
Right.
Even if they understand what the word blue is, it's actually understanding what all the deeper parts of it are.
Right.
I think it could be attributed to a lot of feelings. I mean, if you want to talk color in general, like in color correcting, or like even on TVs, like if you go to the cool setting,
Oh,
You know, it's more. You got more blues in your whatever you're doing. I think blue has always been attributed to like cooler temps. You know, you think of winter and you think of blue.
Cadavers.
Definitely. Blue lips. There's like
Dragon
Blue
Ball
waffles.
Blue waffles?
I mean
Blueberry speckles in the waffles for sure.
I mean blue in jazz is like the cool of jazz.
Kind of blue.
Kind of blue. A little bit of blue.
Love that album.
Kind of blue is like shorthand for like totally fucking cool.
Yeah. Well, that's on the emotional side of it. And for me, it's more of like thinking about bridging that gap between just learning a song, like where you're just learning like what the chords are, the melody is, versus like really digging into like how is somebody playing that piece, or like how should this piece be played. Or in a writing context, you might think of more emotional stuff. But like,
Okay.
yeah, thinking about like, you know, I mean, as a drummer, there's a million ways you could approach stuff. So is it like, yeah, he's going to the ride on the chorus and he's doing that, but is he like kind of dancing off the ride, or is it more of like a real abrupt kind of, you know, heavy-handed thing? Like
Is he
as
using the tip? Is he using the shaft? There's
a million different things you can look at.
good
like-
old tips and shafts. You know?
Yeah, and I don't know, like bass, it's like there's a certain more round, like Paul McCartney sort of bass tone that you hear on like older recordings, or there's like a newer sort of like sleeker sound, and it's like, okay, like instead of just playing the part, it's like, is this more of like a new school or old school way of playing, the way this person's approaching it? And like, you kind of have to take that and adapt it into what you're doing, I think.
How does this pertain to blue?
Blue is like, as far as like, sometimes like when you're explaining that to people, like as far as like, hey, you know, just play it a little bit like this, or play this sort of feel, and then someone goes, oh, okay, but they're not quite getting the thing. Like they're playing the groove, or like they're playing the part, but it's not really like sinking into what the part is.
What's that got to do with the color blue?
That's just what
more just the terminology that we just kind of spitball
It's like a
into.
shorthand.
Yeah, just a shorthand
So-
kind of explanation of like trying to explain the color blue to somebody that doesn't understand what colors are.
Yeah.
That's simply all it is.
Because you can't really put a word on a color other than like what it looks like. You know what I mean? It's like, how would you describe this table if you'd never seen it before?
It's got a lot of weird shit on it.
It does. It certainly does.
We already talked about what that part looks like. Ding ding.
Yes.
My favorite part. I'm gonna leave it there. Well, no, I think that like I think what you're getting into though, there's like I think it gets into the weeds with something as broad as a color, because there's like for me, I'm always going to kind of disseminate between like color as a fact of like a visual medium versus the oral medium. Like to me, it's like I don't like blue only pertains to like genre, and then it doesn't enter my mind. Like I'm still trying to wrap my mind around. I get the idea of like somebody not understanding like a certain style or feel, and that's just kind of like. But I don't know if I've ever thought like blue, like you know what I mean. Like blue is not the word I would have thought of to describe that.
Sure.
And I'm like, I need more context to know like when somebody's getting it, when somebody's not. Like, I guess I get the idea, like when you have a metal drummer who's only been playing for like 6 months or something like that, you know, some kid who's only listened to like Slayer, and then you're like, try to play a shuffle. And then like you show him how a shuffle goes, and then that version of a shuffle, not very bluesy or shuffly.
Right.
Because they are not used to playing with those sorts of accents. I think it just, to me, I always, instead of like, the metaphor, I would always quantify it in like musical terms. There's got to be like some sort of like theory-based, practice-based way of actually expressing that.
Sure.
Because there's, if somebody couldn't get it, then it feels like I always feel like I'm the one at fault. I have to explain it better anyway.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm trying to get a list of performance out of a given person.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, because it makes me think like you're trying to explain what blue is, or you're trying to attribute blue to something that can't be explained, rather than trying to explain what blue is and attribute that to something, if that makes sense. So like, I mean, in musical terms, blue is definitely used, but if we're talking like the difference between two different bass tones, or like a drummer who doesn't know how to play a certain beat, like that's not what I think blue. Like if I'm in a studio or in a music writing session and someone tells me like, can you play it a little more blue? To me, I'm not thinking like, a certain like I'm not thinking a certain technique or something like that. It is definitely a feeling, and I think it definitely attributes to more specific genres than others. But I'm not thinking like, oh, maybe he wants me to play more like Paul McCartney.
Oh yeah,
Like-
I definitely don't attribute it to anything like that. Like when I think of blue, it's never actually the color itself. It's more the trying to explain to somebody what something is, and they don't understand like the fundamental concepts of what it is you're talking about before they can even go deeper. It's like I wouldn't explain to a student what 7/8 time is, or breaking down any like sort of flams or this diddles and blah blah blah, if they can't understand even what counting to 4 is. You have to understand what time is before you even start getting into everything else.
So the difference is what I think we are attributing to blue as like a description.
It's not a descriptor though, right?
It's not a descriptor. It's like it's a thing that people can use in their bag of tricks for like a feeling attributed to a song. And what you're trying to do is assign a term to a like a definition of a broader like understanding or not understanding of something.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, like I would simply define that as lack of context, because specifically that's what it sounds like. There's an inherent lack of context in the situation for
Well,
the players.
then let me expand this out a little bit, because this is a term that we've used before when we're writing stuff, where you said that like that's got the juice, and that's like we use that. Yeah. So like I would put blue and juice in the same category, or like so looking at it like there's this area of music, I think, that like there's all the techniques that you can employ where you can talk about timing, feel, phrasing, songwriting, soloing, whatever it is. And then I think it's when all of that stuff meets somebody's personal experience and how they interpret all of that or their approach to it. And then that person creates a sound. Then to me, blue kind of gets into that category to where it's like it's kind of like the summation of all of your technique and your prowess, I guess, mixed with like how it actually comes out through the instrument, like when you're playing it. So like as a drummer, singer, guitarist, whatever it is. And the term you've used, that like when there's a part that's working really well, it's like, oh, that's got the juice. If it's a little bit weird or a little bit funky or a little bit heavy and you're liking it, I would kind of put blue in that category. So I guess like, I don't know. For me, it's not necessarily just the techniques. It's kind of like a summary of like where everybody's coming from as a player.
Yeah, I get that.
it's just interesting that you assign blue to that, because
He's a white guy. They assign colors and stuff.
well, just,
Half of me totally agreed with him. Like,
The other half,
right from Jump Street, I was like, "Fuck it, this guy's got a point."
the other
Fucking-
half of me
Like
loathed
his
it.
fatigues jacket.
but anyway, but I mean, like, you know,
I do that a lot too.
to
I'm
not
sorry.
you know, on a different
Anyways.
topic other than racism.
Oh, bird.
No, it's interesting that you attribute blue to that, for the fact that like blue in the history of music has been a tribute to very specific things as well. Like, I mean, literally the blue note
Right.
being like a minor third in
Yeah, I don't even know
like a
what it is.
major 7 chord.
Yeah,
Oh,
I,
Like, hey, but out of
yeah, I don't know theory for shit.
Do you mind if I interject
Yeah,
a second?
No, that's what this is about.
I feel like the essence of what you guys are getting at from the conversations that we've had, a lot of what you guys describe as being in the realm of what is considered to be blue
Yeah.
is dealing with a lot of those really esoteric elements of music. Those things that, I mean, you've heard me use that term before. I borrow this from a guy I know, Adam Gust, who's a phenomenal drummer in LA. He used the term ungoogleable.
That's right. Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was so spot on, because a lot of those things that you and I have talked about, and you and I, about existing in that realm of blue,
Yeah.
are those things that everybody becomes innately aware of over time, being a musician. And often those things are esoteric to the degree that people either learn to compartmentalize those things and intellectualize them in their own way, or sometimes people just kind of leave that alone and they allow it to kind of remain in the the fog of war of music, and they don't want to take the mystique out of those things. And when I hear you guys use the word blue, mystique is the word that like pops into my mind.
Well, I guess it's not so much a mystique like I don't want to learn about that stuff. I think it's kind of the opposite in that, like, for me, I want to know as much as I can. I think it's more about, like, why is it that, like, one person just with, like, their two musicians, say both drummers and bass players or whatever it is, keyboardists.
Now we got 6 people.
Yeah, like
keyboardist.
take 2 people that play the same
keyboardist.
Yeah. Take 2 people that play the same instrument, hear them play the exact same song back to back, or just play, and they're going to have 2 totally different sounds. And this is something that our mutual friend Jeff Collier, shout out to Jeff. Jeff.
Wherever you are, Jeff.
Yeah, whichever.
Don't make fun of me anymore, Jeff. You're too good at it, bro.
Yeah.
He's still alive.
No. He's up there.
Rest in peace, Jeff, and Ask Dan.
Big up to Jeff. Love you forever, Jeff.
Yeah. Rest in peace. He's
so
just outside of Nashville.
He's just outside of Nashville.
But he might be asleep.
Which is like, it's like being in a coma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just outside Nashville? Anyway.
Yeah. But so, when we were all going to college together, I mean, not you. I didn't know
Too
you
old for that.
yet.
Yeah.
Too old for that shit.
Too old for that
Not you.
When I was babysitting you guys, yeah.
That I was a little worried because there was already somebody that was in the bass, like, audition performance class and was, like, going to be in that spot. And, like, there was intimidation amongst all the other bass players because it was, like, he was so good. And, like, he was already for sure going to have that spot. And then Jeff told me, like, yeah, but you'll never be, this person. So then it dawned on me of, like, because he said, you didn't grow up like that. You don't have the same life experiences. And that's pretty much in, like, any professional musician I've met. It's like someone could be just as good as somebody else and not have the same technical skill or songwriting skill, but you would still call them a professional musician. And why is that? It's that weird sort of esoteric thing of like what you're talking about, ungoogleable. You can know exactly what the person's doing technique-wise, but still something about the combination of their playing, their gear, and like just whatever they're doing just makes it work. Like they found a winning recipe there. And so it's like, why is that? Is that just from like whatever happens in your brain or your body, like, when you play? Is it some,
Yeah.
See, I mean, I don't know. I just,
As opposed to what?
I don't know.
The
I think
aliens gave it to us?
Well, no, I just think that's how that happens. That's not why it happens. Like, you know what I mean? How something happens is the physiology and what?
What happened?
Oh, no, nothing.
Oh, okay. No, so
That was a shit talk session. Continue.
I mean, he's like, this dude's fucking.
Jesse's a
was
piece of
fine.
shit.
I'm sure.
I don't know nothing about blue.
That dude sucks. You have.
What? What the hell's happening?
I don't know.
Is there a mutiny
I
on
think
this
we
round
kind of
table?
like threw the
Matt's
video
talking
the
shit
cameras
to me.
off.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
We
go
can-
wiggle them cameras.
Yeah, wiggle the camera.
Wiggle the jiggles.
Well, go.
Give me
Well,
another chance.
Well, no, I think that like there's a Herbie Hancock quote from his master class.
Founding father.
Yeah.
Signed the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Declaration.
I learned that in Tommy Boy. That's Herbie Hancock, as he illustriously pointed out.
Thank you for catching
So it's he talked about like in music theory, he said nobody wants to hear and he named off a chord with a bunch of extensions on it. So nobody wants to hear a, C, minor 7 with a blah, 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 blah. And he goes, that's not music, that's craft. And he goes, what you're saying comes from the heart, which is like, and I found that like, I don't want to just hear what somebody's playing and isn't that impressive. It's like, how does that translate to make a great piece? So you can look at like the techniques that somebody uses and their experience. And to me, and you get really into this with the science of all that. To me, that's how it happens. That's not why it happens. And that's more of a philosophical question as opposed to an actual.
Why is it a philosophical question?
Well, the same thing. If you ask somebody why are we here, then you can just go like to procreate and
Because
or-
organisms seem to reproduce. That's
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
Well, okay,
We're
next.
recording a podcast
Like,
now.
there's no overarching design. It seems to be just another really cool simulation at play.
Yeah, well,
It's a
that's
simulation.
Nothing to worry about here.
well, right. I don't know, but I think it's a deeper thing than that, and like
Okay,
I think
respect
it's,
that, but I mean, like, in what way? Because
I don't know. It's
you got to make me believe this.
it's
Great sales pitch.
well, I don't know. I
Yeah,
mean,
this is your
and
elevator pitch, and we're at the 10th floor.
I
bro.
don't want to
And
just
my
shout.
office is on the 12th.
I don't want to just shout into an echo chamber. I want to get everybody's thoughts on it, but like
Okay.
it's to me there is some sort of like I don't consider any idea I've ever come up with to come from me. I think it's coming from somewhere else.
That I agree with.
Yeah, and so I think that playing in the moment is kind of like that too. I don't
electro-
But I don't think that's
I-
the method isn't that mysterious about what we produce. I think the conduit, like the aspect of like where the initial things are coming from once you're doing what you're doing, that's hard to say. But it has to do with something with like the brain waves you're creating by doing the activity. I think honestly, it's that slow focus sort of thing or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
I think it's very much on a like it's very much something you can quantify biologically. If you want to look at it through that lens, you can always look at it through the philosophical lens if you want. But to me, like when you talk about like what makes it like what makes that chord come from the heart that makes it sound the way it does when it happens, I think that like whatever the conduit itself, yeah, there's like no telling where that comes from. But what you show to other people and what you have to hack out and give to them, whether however sick you are with it, it's always an effort to create and then produce it and then put it through the medium and then share it with other people. That's entirely different than the moments I have by myself that I'm like, hey, where the hell did that come from? I'm like, yeah. That's a moment that I'd be happy to just, like, all I can tell you is beats the fuck out of me. What y'all think?
I feel like when it comes to a lot of this stuff, a lot of these topics that we end up getting into these discussions about, they have a lot to do with areas of musicianship that maybe just haven't had as much work and exploration performed into. Because I feel like a lot of these things, they really can be intellectualized, but on a more individual level. Like a lot of these things are very hard to, get across in a group setting. But everybody knows that feeling when you are having a discussion with somebody that you just vibe with. Like you're kind of on the same connection, and you can sense that from somebody. And so, maybe something that's a little esoteric that you've spent time really digging into, and maybe you've really developed a concept for it in a way that you're thinking about it in a very concrete, flexible, and actionable way. People who are on that same kind of wavelength usually will gel with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I tend to get really left brain heavy about things. Like when I find an area of my playing or a piece of my musicianship that I'm feeling frustrated about, I get dinged for this approach a lot because a lot of people think that it's anti-musical for some reason. But my way of dealing with those things is to intellectualize them, to try to break them down into their, like subcomponent parts, and to try to build a more complete picture of why something functions a certain way. So, for example, like playing the perfect chord at the perfect time with the perfect amount of taste. There's context, and there are variables happening in the moment that attribute to why that has a certain amount of impact. And if even one of those things is knocked off, everything changes. And I think in terms of what you would call blue is maybe people's instinct for that kind of thing. It's a very metaphysical thing where somebody can completely ingest the whole of the context of what's going on in the moment, and to know how to make that maybe not perfect choice, but to make a very informed choice, and to know that it's going to come across a certain
Yield
way.
a dynamic result.
Right. And to do that with deliberation.
Yeah.
And because we all know musicians who play with extreme deliberation.
Yeah.
Every single thing that they play has such purpose and
He did the finger dance.
and value. you
Yeah.
know? Every single thing that they play, you can hear, you can feel that it's being played for a reason.
Yeah.
There are things attached to that, and that's part of everybody's concept.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and concept is something that doesn't really get talked about a lot outside of, you know, jazz and fusion music, because it's so central to what makes up your voice as
Yeah.
a musician. Because I mean, I draw a lot of inspiration from a lot of styles of music, but the only guys I really hear throwing around the word concept with the definition and context that I'm talking about are usually jazz players or guys who happen to play jazz.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean by concept?
Concept is basically your approach. To really, really dumb it down. It's your approach, it's your voice, and it's a part of your voice that you're both consciously aware of and can control.
Yeah.
It's a part of your playing that you're intimately aware of and that you know how to implement in the correct way. And if you're the kind of person who is really versatile musician and you like to play in a lot of different contexts, maybe some in which you're not trying to overly do what it is that you do, you also know how to turn that off, and you know the things that are part and parcel to what makes up your voice, because you are digging into some of the more intellectual and conceptual side of these things, and so you develop a really clear idea of context and use cases in which certain parts of your vocabulary or your bag of tricks, as it were, tend to work really, really well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for non-jazz styles, I would
Dig that.
I would think of like approach is like what each person individually, not Trump hands, not gonna do that.
Nagada?
Not gonna do it.
All right.
Yeah, no, I did that on a couple podcasts and I realized doing this, and now it's just not a good look for me or anybody.
If you were in the bathtub, it would make like the wave, like the tidal pool.
Right, but that's you know,
Which is totally rad.
right. It is totally rad.
As you
I mean, I don't know.
My liege.
Yeah, my my liege. Like, so let's say we're all. I mean, not that this is a stretch of a concept, but like if we were all in one band, like the Lava Lamps, and we're going on
Doobie
fucking
Brothers
tour.
Lava Lamps.
Yeah, the Lava Lamps.
Terrible name.
The
What?
Gavels.
Gavels is kind of hard.
Like everybody, yeah, you're the singer, you're the drummer,
Oh,
keyboardist, bassist, guitarist.
interesting.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
I never get to play
Just
bass.
as George Carlin would say, just for the sake of argument.
Okay.
Let's go with that. Everybody's approach is going to build the concept, because it's your approach is everything about what you bring to it. It's I would say that goes for musical and non-musical stuff. So that's your playing, your attitude, your gear, your stage presence. It's like, what are you adding into this whole entire recipe? You mix all that together, that is the concept of what you're going to be seeing for the evening. So like, and I'm thinking about it in a live context, obviously, like just because we're talking about playing music. So I think recording gets into another discipline, but if you're just purely looking at performing for people, everybody's everybody's approach is going to build up this concept or create this concept, and then that will be tweaked and evolved over time, like any sort of chemical formula or recipe. Because I mean, they call it chemistry amongst musicians, right? So it's like, I don't think that that's one thing that irks me when people go like, it's not chemistry in the sense of like Bunsen burners and beakers and shit. It's chemistry in the sense, could be, I don't know. I mean, I
Depends
don't
on
know.
your band.
I don't know what's going on in the fucking tour bus before you come out there. So it's, all of that is chemistry, right? And I'm still doing it. I don't
just did
care.
them.
It's going to happen. That you add that in there, and then
Start doing this.
yes,
Even it out. They
But-
should make Pence do that.
you should.
He's like, hey, everybody.
He's doing the opposite hands. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get
it's
it.
like, I'm opposite hands. Okay.
But you get what I'm saying. So it's basically everybody's approach is going to make this concept, and then they're all going to tweak what that concept translates to for an audience. So, and that's pretty much any commercial style that's not like a jazz sort of thing. I think if that's a rock band, I think if that's, you know, any funk groups, like blues stuff, like all of this is creating a concept for people, you know, like folk band, whatever the hell it is. It's like you're creating a concept. So I don't know if that gels with, you know, what you would consider a concept, but that's
Yeah.
my...
It does for me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was gonna put in my my high brain conceptualization.
Yeah. It's not
So-
it won't be as good as Matt's. Though.
Probably not.
Matt's was good.
Please.
I don't know. I want to consider like someone's ability to play music maybe into two different components, and one would be skill, which is something that we all grow up learning.
Right.
Learning how to play our music, we get taught, how to play, and then the other thing would be talent, which I believe is something is just everyone is born with, and it's talent doesn't necessarily dictate how well of a musician you're going to like how good of a musician you're going to be, but it will dictate how you interact with music. So I think everybody, and since talent is just like inbred, it's inherited, it's yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's ears all of a sudden perked up.
Talent has become a very
Search terms.
talent's become a very dangerous term to throw around in recent
Talent
years.
should be canceled.
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with how most people would view talent. Like, oh, he or she is a very talented individual.
People think talent's magic.
Prodigies are considered very talented, but I just kind of consider talent as the way that we interact with music, or anything that we do in a a sports capacity or an arts capacity. And then those together combine to make what you are as a musician, and then how you take your talent and interact with other musicians is the conception of what you were talking about.
Right.
So talent almost being like a skew of what particular like propensities you have towards different areas of musicianship. Or...
Yeah, I think your talent is your ability to take chances on stage, or I'll play this chord this way instead of this way. Like, it's still the same chord that I learned how to play, but my talent is telling me to, I don't know, just play it in a specific way so it makes it my own.
This gets close to one of my definitions. It's like the confidence to express something that's innate or instinctual is really what it is. Because to me, the analogy that, like, now that I really wrap my head around blue and I totally get it, it's like, to me, it's just like trying to be funny. Like, in my family, we were musical, but it was all about like trying to crack jokes and talk shit about each other, and like whoever got the biggest laugh won every minute, and it was like fucking 6 people going all out all the time.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, I know that I'm fucking funny, and I've always thought like, man, I want to do something with that. I still don't know what, and I probably won't. But the important thing is that I understand what it is that's the talent part, which is that something tells me a literal thing, like a line occurs when somebody says something. Like when you say something, how many times I'm like, here's what just happened in my head.
Right.
Now, the only thing that like, the thing that I think modifies like that raw talent is kind of how I look at it. What makes it develop into something more approaching like musicianship or mastery or whatever you want to call that, higher end stuff, is that you learn to determine not to do it every time it occurs. Because then you're just like a baby fucking rattlesnake. You're just biting everything that touches you and shit. And then eventually you run out of venom, and then you're actually not safe, little baby.
Right. So I would say like your skill is what you've learned is funny.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly.
you understand that that's funny, but your talent is telling you to either go for it at the time or to hold back.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. So we kind of re-invert the terms, but it's, very same dynamic there.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I would take an even broader stance of like that talent to me has always just been a natural aptitude that you have for doing these things. So it's like the ease, basically what you're talking about, but the ease of like how that comes to you. So it's like, were you able to start picking up your instrument and playing fairly proficiently in like a really short amount of time, or was this like something you wanted to do but it was a really foreign concept to you and it took a lot more like disciplined practice, because there's some people, and I think we've talked about this before with your brother Chris, where it's like he was picked up the guitar just kind of just it was really natural for him, but you had to take a really studied approach to like learning drums, just because it was not something that necessarily came easy at first.
Not even studied. That's a thing that a lot of people.
Not studied, but you know what I mean. It was just two different approaches.
I had to take a very a very structured and deliberate approach, because those things did not come naturally to me, especially in the realm of physical development on the instrument and overall like kinesthetic awareness, if you want to think about it like that. And when it comes to these things, that's kind of why, rather than talent, I think a lot of these things as being like cognitive proficiencies that people are born with. Everybody's born with a brain that's wired in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we attribute to being musical talent are just people, I think they're broader things, where they're parts of people's overall cognitive makeup that are these much bigger, broader attributes that happen to play very, very well into the use case that you're attaching them to. So, for instance, like physical development is something that has always been very, very hard for me. I'm not a naturally fast guy, never have been. And that's something that I've had to learn to overcome purely with technique. So a lot of things that are much easier for other people to execute naturally, and maybe with whatever could be considered to be improper form or whatever.
Bad technique. He's so nice, he doesn't like to say words like that. That's why I drop you little subtleties.
Well, I try to not think about it in those terms anymore, because I know that there are people who are born with innate physical propensities too, right?
He made like boobs.
People's phenotypes are different. People have different, degrees of, A muscle fiber versus B, and whatever that ultimately adds up to, your innate cardiovascular fitness, all of those things play into the bigger whole of what allows you to execute on your instrument.
Sure.
And how you conceptualize things too. And I'm a very conceptual, albeit intellectualizing type of guy. I like to take things from an abstract form and try to mold them into something that is malleable. So taking something that is almost like gaseous and incorporeal and trying to mold that into something that I can actually shape with my hands and that's usable.
See, I would consider that your talent.
Yeah.
Like that, your talent, that is, you have a talent for being able to do that.
Right.
And, if we all had the same amount of learning and skill, like that talent allowed you to use those skills to become the musician you are now.
Right.
Well, the interesting thing about that is the thing that really developed that skill for me was teaching. And it came from a place of having these questions about these really abstract things and trying to phrase them in a way to people that, they made sense so that somebody could give me an answer back. And the thing that happened is ultimately I got to a place where I could, structure those things to a point that I could ask a really concrete question about it. But the thing is, most musicians do, at least that I have met. I don't want to generalize and say that, but it's been much more rare for me to meet the kind of musician who has the answers to those types of questions. So when you are able to phrase them in a really concrete way, it's still really rare that somebody else has gone to that level of depth in solidifying what is abstract to be able to have a palpable answer.
So what's an example of that question? If you can think of one.
Palpable.
A really great example to me would be, let's use John as an example, right? John LaCroix.
Hold on. Papa.
Oh,
His name.
he will cringe at that.
Papa. Your name is Papa.
Oh snap!
But like for example, when I was still doing test flight, which we all know to be the advanced commercial music ensemble.
Yeah.
Is that what its official title was?
Yeah, it's
Rock band plus.
yeah. So, and-
Rock band with auditions.
so there's a where we're at in this high desert area. There's a community college called Antelope Valley College, and there's a commercial music program that we've all pretty much been involved with to a certain extent. And you know, I think because you've taken some classes, you didn't get your certs there.
No, I used that shit to transfer.
Okay, right,
It's a transfer school, boy.
right, right.
Use that shit.
Right?
It was my in-between
It was my
college.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that program, they have a beginning rock band class taught by your old bandmate. Not old, but former
Oh,
previous
my old
bandmate.
buddy mate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nate Dillon.
My former mentor
Yeah.
and tormentor.
Yes. And hopefully we'll get Nate on the podcast one of
Oh
these
yeah,
days.
he's on the list. He's on
Yeah.
Google Docs. I just put him in before we went on mic
Yeah, nice.
because I was like Nate Dillon because everything.
Right. And
Nate.
so and the advanced version of that class, it was commercial music
Watch yourself,
ensemble
counselor.
called Test Flight.
Yes.
So
Have we all been in it? Can I interrupt real quick? Were you in it, Hod?
yeah.
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 Then we
Yeah.
were all in it.
So it's basically a class where you
It's like we all
are
fuck the same
yeah
person. I'm gonna not gender this.
Not quite. Different instructors. Same room, but different instructors. It's a
Yes.
whole different
Yes.
different vibe per instructor.
And
I like
you-
the sex analogy.
yeah.
Of course.
And you're basically tasked with learning anything from like, I don't know, it could be a classic rock song, it could be a top 40 pop song, or it could be something as abstract as like a Bjork song, which we had to do
Which
one
Bjork
semester.
Earth
Intruders.
Oh yeah.
Intruders.
Yeah.
That's a lot of going on.
Yeah. And or
My first semester of test flight, I was tasked with learning 40 songs in a couple weeks.
right.
That's a crunch,
So
dude.
they put you in real life, band situations in a safe, sort of simulated environment where it's basically just like you're not gonna get fired from this gig and feel like a failure if
it's
you
not about the
flub some
Tenacious
notes.
D,
You know what I
gig
mean?
simulator.
Yeah.
It's a matter of hey, this is a real challenge. Can you do this?
Well, there definitely were stakes involved.
Oh, there's stakes. I
People
mean,
definitely got
Omaha.
dropped for their ability to
Not a sponsor.
either not
Yeah.
show up or not to perform.
right.
Yeah.
So
And if you walk off a gig, hey, no telling.
there's what I mean is it's
Don't double book yourself.
It's a real life challenge in a relatively safe environment, to
Right.
where it's unlike the real
Yeah.
world where things are not
They'll cut you.
necessarily.
You
yeah.
just get fired or blackballed for
Yeah.
your area or whatever.
for your face.
Yeah. So with that class, hold on. Help me with the point. Help me
What
with
is
the
your point? So
Lost
with
it.
that class, test flight does what? It's a safe environment and everybody's okay.
Yeah. Well,
but you're learning a lot.
we
so
were
what?
talking about with talent.
Yeah, but what's it got to do with
He
John
was,
anyway?
he was going to talk.
He's
He
gonna talk
was
about John.
talking about John, and then you wanted
You had-
to
you
explain
had-
who
Okay,
John was.
yeah, so yeah, we need to let everybody know who John is. Now we're caught up. So anyway, continue. I'm sorry.
John is the instructor.
Is
of
this-
Yeah,
test flight.
John is
I don't
the-
think you actually said that.
What just happened here?
He's just a dude that taught us some stuff.
All right. Anyway,
You remember the college? though.
sorry,
That's a-
Matt.
That's a good
Continue.
So, John is somebody who would deal
Oh yeah.
quite a lot with some of the more esoteric things about just being a musician in general.
Yes.
But being an extremely proficient player, if we can say that.
Yes.
Cold beast.
Player meaning a drummer and a piano player, keyboard player. Having
He
that
made you feel
perspective-
real. He made you feel real good when he could play better than the drummer and the keyboardist
Right.
in the band.
But having that mentality of someone who comes from both sides of the spectrum, very very deep into the the rhythmic study aspect of music and the things that pertain to the 80-20 of what is your study as a drummer, and also having that extremely harmonically deep side of understanding, going through the program at CSUN that he went through with the people that he went through it
Sure.
with, he would use a lot of phrases that took a long time for me to unpack. And one that I remember being particularly difficult for me was the idea of playing aggressively.
That is
And
blue.
Every time I would ask him
For our definition.
Yeah.
Is it really?
to try to define
Aggressive
what
is
he
blue?
would think of as playing aggressively, he couldn't really give me quite a straight answer because it was made up of so many different components that ultimately it's an attitude and it's also an approach.
Yeah.
It's how you lead things, how you phrase, how aware you are
Yeah.
of what's going on in the band, using the right
Yes.
instruments at the
Right.
right time on
Nuance.
the drum set. So having that instinct to not only execute an idea well, but to voice it in a way that's very effective,
Right.
that the band will clearly understand. The idea of telegraphing what is happening to the
Yeah.
band at any given time and being a propelling force for the band and also a guidepost.
Yeah. Make the band better.
Yeah. I mean, most musicians, at least coming up, if you tell them to play aggressively, and this is probably more so for drummers than most other instruments, that interpretation means, oh, I need to play louder
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely
Or at
not.
least harder.
or harder. Yeah,
Yeah.
harder, louder.
Because that's what we identify as aggressive. Like
Yeah,
what is
sing-
aggressive? Now I'm aggressive.
Sing aggressively. Oh, I mean, like, I'll put growl in my voice or play guitar aggressively.
Yeah.
I mean, I need to turn on distortion or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Whereas
Not
that is just
necessarily.
be more assertive. Play with more control.
To be assertive,
Right.
But-
I agree.
it goes deeper than that.
Oh,
it
you
has
think
to
so?
do, yeah, it
Yeah.
has to do with your.
it's not just because you could just play. You could just say play confidently.
Yeah.
Yeah, now you're just
I
like,
think
okay,
it
I'm
depends on
going here.
like. I mean, it's a. So it's kind of like it gets into like method. It's like translation wise, like motivation wise. What is aggression like? For me, the immediate corollary is like violence. So what I honestly, when I have been directed to play more aggressively, knowing that, like you guys said, those basic dynamics or those basic like musical tenets, that's not what this applies. This is more nuanced. So I actually have to drive it into what I'm doing psychologically. Like I play the same thing without thinking about the physical effect, but I'm trying to get myself into an aggressive state of mind. Like basically I'm pissed off enough to hurt somebody. Because now the problem is it's like if I'm working with somebody trying to do something for them, I'd need a little bit more direction on what that aggression means. Because with me, you're going to see exactly what it means, and it's a fixed and specific quantity, and it may be more than you were thinking or less or a side of it, But I think I get what you mean because for me, it's almost acting it while I'm playing as opposed to like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, or an imagination thing.
Well, a lot
Right.
of this stuff for me has been reverse engineering the things that I've done over the years that have led to me developing a more aggressive sound. And to have actually played with John later in the future and to have had him tell me that my playing had become more aggressive. And a lot of that had to do with choices, for sure. Placement as well. Your ability to negotiate where you are placing notes relative to the tempo of the song.
Right.
So with John, something I learned later on is that a lot of his favorite players have a more forward-leaning time center. Like Steve Ferroni, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
Tom Petty.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very forward-leaning and on-top player. Extremely consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so there's just a ton of momentum behind everything that he does.
Yeah.
Did he play on Running Down a Dream?
That's what I heard in my
I
head
think
just
so.
now.
Because when I think of like Tom Petty songs that are like really just like leaning tempo wise, like that one is like
You
first to
Wreck
come to
Me,
mind.
dude.
You Wreck Me
Just
would
like
be
dun-
a
That's
great
like the
example.
prime example. for
Oh,
me.
right. Mm-hmm.
You Wreck Me.
Okay.
So, that being said, once I kind of hit all of those different areas, that led to a different kind of attitude on the drum set that I understood more clearly. To say that I understood it understand it is still not accurate. But I have a clearer picture of what he meant, and if I asked him those questions now, I could probably get a clearer answer.
Right.
But there have been a lot of things like that with a lot of different teachers that I've had.
Right.
Another thing that John used to refer to all the time with everybody that also ties into the idea of playing aggressively is the idea of playing fluffy. Right?
Yeah.
I was actually just thinking about that like today because I'm practicing tracking at home, so I'm just in my regular practice sessions.
Right.
I just set up my Pro Tool sessions, hit record, and then just listen back, like what I don't like, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
Start again,
right.
and I was just thinking about that term where I was like, all right, that was pretty solid. Fluffy. And I'm glad you brought that up.
But then you have to think about, okay, well, what constitutes somebody's playing to be fluffy?
Right.
What makes up a fluffiness to someone's
Yeah.
playing? So, as I understand it, what I've come to attach meaning to with that is the idea of deliberation and definition. And drums being, not necessarily a pitch central instrument, but polyphonic all the same.
Yeah.
You as a drummer, a huge part of your sound and the momentum, power you're able to generate has to do with your ability to play tight with yourself.
Right.
And to play multiple things with multiple limbs, trying to play them either at the same time, and if they're not going to be at the same time, with enough precision that you can play them juxtaposed to each other consistently. And that creates a very aggressive sounding drummer right there. It's just somebody who has that level of consistency and deliberation in how they play something.
Right.
And control, too.
Yeah, that's a huge factor.
It's that consistency that's really hard to work on, and that's something that just grows through a lot of time. You can't just tell somebody to just play more consistent and then just like, oh sure, let me just.
It is, but there are a
get that
lot
real
of
quick.
things that you can bring to people's attention that they're not necessarily listening to. And unfortunately, as an instrument, I feel, I'm not saying this is an absolute, but I
No,
feel
sure.
like drummers are certainly the biggest offender of, the member of the bandstand that tends to be the most small-eared, if we want to call it that.
I feel that.
Like
Yeah.
the least active listener.
The least
Yes,
active listening,
absolutely.
the least informed listeners as well, because the truth is,
Generally less intelligent.
That's us.
Big wangs though, right? Those are big wangs.
I don't know about that.
I was trying to help brother out.
I'll take it.
There you go.
Usually the first to overdose in the band.
That's
But-
technically true.
Well,
Late asses.
it's interesting because
Late.
as a
I am
drummer,
also a drummer, audience.
Yeah, that's right. John LaCroix Jr.
I'm the bass player, so I'm just happy to be here.
Hey, right? Yeah. Everybody tolerates you.
it's strange because as a drummer, you can kind of, I say kind of very carefully. This is a statement. I want
You
to be
seem
very
to be.
careful about how I make. As a drummer, you can kind of get away with maybe being the least musically knowledgeable person in the group.
Oh, that's always me. I don't know shit
In-
about theory.
In terms of your theoretical understanding of what's going on and your overall level of listening, because there is that element of it's entirely possible to be a drummer and know absolutely nothing about harmony for your entire existence.
Sure.
I don't. Yeah, but I'm like you're gonna hit your limitations several times in that.
Exactly.
And I'm like, all it would take something is as little as like becoming an intermediate guitarist.
But you would
and the
be
theory that
amazed how
accompanies
many
that.
people go their entire existence on the instrument and never reach for another instrument.
It's hard for me to fathom because
It
that's all I
is.
do. I just scatter them around the house, and I don't understand. If you can, why wouldn't you do that?
It's
guess-
more rare than it is common for drummers to also play a harmonic instrument.
But I would-
that's been my experience.
I would say too, though, that you can develop your listening and not necessarily have the harmony in the sense of like if you know
Right.
the material, you might not know what's off, but you can go like, wait, there's something
That's
weird with.
more the kink
Right.
that I follow.
Well, I was gonna say because whenever we're having band practice and like you're listening to everybody, and so you might not go like, oh wait, that sounded, off. Like you can't name specifically like what was off about it, but it's like, oh, there was some dissonance in this section. Like something sounded weird there. Like let's run that again. Oh, okay, yeah, that was, this thing is clashing.
I mean,
These two guitars or guitars and keys or whatever.
yeah, I think maybe it's just easier for drummers to get into the headspace that what I'm doing is good enough. Because I feel like as a musician, you reach a point where you're either like, okay, I'm doing everything right. I don't need to change, or you get to a point where it's like, okay, this sounds good, but I know there's like more I can do. I feel like and maybe it's because it's a non-melodic instrument, that as long as you have a good solid backbeat
You can't lose it.
in one genre, like you don't need to be better at anything else as long as you're not planning to to get into another band or play another genre.
Bringing
or
John
like, God
back into
forbid.
this, during my first semester at Test Flight, we were playing Barracuda by heart, and Jesse was bassist on that song with me,
Allegedly.
as I remember it.
There's video footage.
And we were going through some of the sections, and it's got really prominent like bass and kick drum tightness in the song.
Yes,
it's just it's there. And I remember John at one point telling me and Jesse, hey, you guys need to play that tighter. And I was completely new to playing in bands, playing with other people, because I've always played, by myself in my own shed, just going at
Brought
it.
you in to audition and you had no idea what the fuck you were getting.
Yeah, I had
in
no
for.
idea.
For
Like,
play on my audition.
Yeah.
And then it was like, hey, we could use another drummer. How about you?
So it was just like, okay, I'm in there.
Yeah, no clue.
cool,
So we're playing Barracuda, and John goes, you guys need to be tighter. And all I thought was, how can we be tighter?
Right.
We're playing.
Yeah.
We're playing at the same time. Like the time's not off.
Keys.
We're playing the rhythms right on there. Dun 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 dun. All the doubles were like right there.
Yeah.
And I had
Oh.
no concept of what he meant of how can that be tighter? We're already playing the notes at the same time. How can that be tighter? And it wasn't years later that I realized, oh shit, that's what he was talking about. That is what I'm talking about when I say like that blue territory. When you tell somebody something so simple to you, it's just like, yeah, just knock that in a little tighter. For me, it was just like, well, we're playing at the same time. How can that be tighter?
Well, and also too, I think this speaks to like all of this is talking about just when a teacher gives you that piece of information, just plants that seed, and then you go like, how can that be tighter? And then years later, the light bulb goes off, and you go, oh shit, and like you finally get it. And like I had those moments a lot. Like I had no clue really like what I was doing at that stage. And I mean that sounds normal to say, but when you actually put yourself
You were so young.
well, if you put yourself in the frame of mind of like being there, you don't think that you don't know what you're doing, even if you don't have an ego about what you do. You don't necessarily think like, oh, I have no clue. It isn't until that you discover that there's a whole nother room to this house that you've been living in. You're like, what the fuck? We had a basement? And then you're like,
That's
you
exactly
go
what I
look
feel
in there and it's like, oh shit, there's a slide projector down here. There's like an old stack of Mad magazines. Like, oh my God, I've been missing out.
I'd say when it comes to like drums especially.
Mad magazines is like micro timing, basically, when you find out that that's a thing. This is how my brain works.
Micro timing.
Yeah. You think that just because you're on a 1, you hit a 1, that's fine. You don't think about where am I landing on the 1? Am I behind the beat or in front of the beat? It's little things like this that
I
it's
find
like
with the drums, it's so easy to like
stack them.
when you learn a new beat or something like
Far out.
that. As soon as you've got the beat as an early player, you feel like, oh, I got it. That's it. My learning is done. I can go doom ka doom doom ka. But it's not until a lot later that you realize, oh man, that spacing could be so much more even. I can bring down the volume of those hi-hats, bring up a little bit of the snare, punch in that kick a little bit more. Like there's so much personal mixing
There's always
that
a
you do yourself.
quantifiable thing, though.
Right.
I mean,
Sure.
at the end of the day, that's what it is about the betterment aspect. I think is that's the part that's not really like mystical for me in any way. That's the part that's just metrical. Like, oh, you can break down and figure it out, and that's the thing I'm grateful about.
And that's the
If that's
Otherwise, I
your
would still
method for it.
suck. Yeah, that's fair because everybody's definitely. If you don't have the same process, then yours
Like when it comes to
must be
methods,
different. And if
when it comes to
goes
learning
wrong-
methods, me and Matt almost in certain areas couldn't be further away from each other. Like the
Right.
way that he was describing about, 30 minutes ago, or with how he breaks things down and wants to quantify it and like hold it in his hands and mold it like clay. I'm the complete opposite. I just want to sit down and fucking play.
Yeah.
And I'll just, with brute force, get better at my instrument and learn all these little things along the way. So I can describe it the way that I need to, but it's not within music theory of it's a flamma tap of this. I'm just like, okay, it's a that. And somebody goes, oh, you just did a this. I go, I don't fucking know what that is. All I know is apparently it's correct, but I can do it a little bit better. And I'm just going to continue working at it as hard as I can, but never once do I think, how do I quantify this? How do I dig this deeper in a scientific way? Like, I'm just not that person, and there's no right or wrong answer to that.
Right.
You've gotten to where you are with that. I've gotten to where I am with how I do it, and we each do the things that we do based on how we do them. It's not, especially within all of music, it's not a competition.
It's very individual.
No.
too, because
Very
But I
individual.
still think it comes down to those two basic kind of points of view or avenues to go down, and it really is a matter. They're both the same formula. It's a matter of like effort over time, if you will, because it's just like what you had to do is dedicate yourself to going out there and putting yourself in that space of just sitting down and playing, which in its own way takes the exact same amount of energy biologically as it does to for me to play for a couple minutes and then think about what I did for a while without playing, then listen a lot because I seem to think listening is the key. And then I go back and play a little bit more. And what happened is over time, it's like I tried it all different ways practice because I just wanted to get better so bad. And what I learned is like you really only want I personally I will play hard for like 15, 20 minutes at a time and then stop, like just literally stop. But the shit is on a timer. And I go to the next instrument because there's only so much time in the fucking day for that kind of stuff anyway.
Right.
But the reality is you're really just trying to get into that. I think of it as like in the same way that you're doing that, it's like I might have looked at like some sheet music to prepare beforehand, but those 20 minutes, I'm just trying to blow on the sax or like play the guitar part and just internalize everything musically. There's not a lot of like intellectualization at that point in the moment. I think that's where everyone gets to, but yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same thing for me of like any sort of intellectual approach or analyzing anything or really trying to internalize that or really, I guess, to put a broad term on it, the thinking of all of it, I want to happen in the practice space and the rehearsal space. When I'm playing for an audience or with a group of people or even in a recording session, I don't want to be thinking about it at all. Like,
absolutely.
yeah, and
in a perfect world.
Well,
Well, yeah,
I
in a
find that you
perfect
can go for
world.
longer. If you distract
Right.
yourself.
right. I mean, there's this stuff that they have at the register of like at AM PM at like the gas station that I think helps you with that.
That keeps it like it's not a problem staying.
I want
staying-
to. I want
It's not a
to.
problem staying. It's a problem not going.
I wanna-
Like,
I
I don't want
wanna-
to leave so early.
I want to extend my chops into where the audience really gets a feel for this.
I don't know where that's going.
Yeah.
Sponsorship.
Use the promo.
Yeah,
code.
what is that, Tiger or whatever it's called?
Use the promo code council.
Yeah, use SEC at checkout. Tell them to check.
I think a lot of this ultimately boils down to approaches that are based in the idea of material beats method versus method beats material.
Right.
And what I mean by that is someone who takes the kind of approach that David takes as opposed to myself is that's a very natural musician way of thinking about it. So when you think about people who live in Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico,
Thinking about it.
I was thinking about it before you said it.
when you think about the cultures
Nice.
that, those forms of music were developed in, that's a very non-school based
Yeah, let's just pick it up and
culture
do it.
of music. Like when I think about Brazilian musicians and carnival and thousands of people marching in the street playing individual instruments, and so many of these people can play basically every instrument. And they show up and somebody I mean, I'm not speaking from experience because I've never been on the streets of Rio.
But it's
to
a
see
different
it.
cultural thing. They
But-
do have like these giant fucking academies where they just practice
and they
like
do.
batucada all
Yeah,
day.
There definitely is like an intellectualized, educational based method of that. And there is also the natural musician side of it. So, you know, it's like when you see those amazing videos of some kid in like a village in Africa who's playing like a makeshift drum set that's basically built out of, you know, what's essentially trash.
Right.
They're killing it.
And playing phenomenally and
Right.
doing things that are on such a deep level conceptually and also rhythmically that they arrive to by completely natural means.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody who comes from a very schooled approach and maybe understands how that stuff works inside out, but maybe can't replicate it,
Doesn't sound convincing.
they would maybe think to themselves, there's no way until they see evidence to the contrary. There is no way that someone could come to this conclusion, this rhythmic idea or phrase or idea without an informed upbringing.
Well, it's it because that what you're talking about there is like music from other parts of the world are much more idiomatic than Western music. So you have to go for the whole culture if you want to get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because only then will you start to it's like an intuition sort of thing is when the idioms start to like actually have a sense of recognition or meaning in your own mind instead of being like, why did they say that? That's not the literal.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of dichotomy to that too, because I personally had a teacher from Venezuela, our own Surfati, who made a really big point of getting across to everyone that you don't need to go live in Brazil to learn to play samba well.
Right.
You don't need to go to Cuba to learn how to play salsa.
Right.
Cha-cha-cha. Just, you know, everything that's enveloped in that. You don't need to do those things. It's a matter of doing your homework. It's a matter of study and listening. And listening is everything.
That's
Yeah.
how it gets everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
But you probably
you
still
should
won't.
just fucking go.
But you probably still won't get to the same level as someone who grew up in that. Like,
Maybe.
Like you'll play it well, but you know that guy who like grew up in that style of music
Well,
is
see,
probably always going
and
to be
then
better than you.
that's when it no longer becomes a question of like really wanting to emulate perfectly. It becomes more about the syncretic effect of like some Buena Vista social club type of situation
just
where
thinking about
the two
that.
types of players are not they're not informing the music the same way, and therefore it's becoming this new. It's like a diacritic thing inside the music they're making.
Well, I'd also like to think that those people who are growing up in those types of musical settings, and that's like all they can play, that maybe if they, you know, they'll bring that to a different style of music, and it's not going to sound like that style of music either.
Right.
But if we're studied musicians, and like Matt said, you can still learn to play those styles well, then at that point you're incorporating it into yourself
Well,
and becoming like an entirely new thing.
At that point, you're a syncretic
The
form in
thing that
essence.
he tried to get across more than anything is that you can become just as proficient as a quote-unquote native speaker if you're dedicated enough.
Yeah.
And if you seek out the resources and the people who allow you to do that. So obviously, if you want to stay in the U.S. and speak that language
please, can
natively,
I?
you need to be speaking with native speakers.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
let me live in Michigan and
Yeah.
Texas forever.
But I guess the question is how proficient can you get at that style of music, being an American player, while still trying to play all the American styles of music.
Right.
Well, and I would even take that into something that we all grew up with here, is with blues. And that's something that that seems eerily simple in the sense of, oh, it's just the 1-4-5, it's like, I know what those chords are. And it's like,
Right.
to me, being a real, I wouldn't say connoisseur because that sounds slightly pretentious. I would say being
Connoisseur.
I would say a blues fan, in that I really love it and I grew up with it. And so anything from the Delta stuff, so you get Robert Johnson, Lead Belly, Honey Boy Edwards, people like that, Son House,
Blind Willie McHale.
yeah, all of that.
Oh, no.
Man.
Blind Willie Johnson. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
About Deaf Willie.
Sunhouse.
What?
Deaf Willie.
Deaf Willie?
Buka White.
Yeah, that's one that goes like. Yeah, get out of here. You're banished.
Two-toed Jim.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't know shit about blues.
Right. So, and then you get the electric era, right? And then you have all that. You can trace the whole progression of how this thing has evolved. And you look at like it went from like people who birthed this music, and then it got passed to people that didn't, and they had their interpretation of it. So that could be like the British bands of the '60s were the first people to really do that. And now it's like pretty much
White Cats.
right. And so it's a matter of now anybody could play blues. It's going to happen. You just have to let it happen.
We're letting it happen. Hey, you've been macerated.
Yeah, you've been macerated. Put the stamp across the screen.
So I feel like maybe the only style of music that we have in America now that can be considered something like that is gospel music. Is something that is ingrained into a culture and people grow up within that like style of music and learning that style of music.
Yeah, I couldn't
Right,
sound
it's
like
a
a
very-
gospel player if I tried like over a
I
long
mean,
period of time.
I could fake
No,
it.
that's
but
again, that's
I don't
idiomatic.
think I
That's
could
the
do
church
it.
experience.
Yeah.
all
It's such
of
a
that
different
stuff
sound.
comes from a bigger place too, because if you look back historically, like the basis of American music and what is essentially our ethnic music, our idiosyncratic form of music,
Whoa, he said the E word.
is like based
It's going on the
in
internet, bro.
music that comes from the swing pulse,
right.
right? So blues is part of that,
Mm-hmm.
and jazz is part of that. Jazz is an American form of music.
Yeah.
It originated here, and everything that has come afterward was informed by that, and that includes rock, acid jazz, metal.
Yeah,
even
everything.
everything that came after was a result of that first.
Right.
It was the swing pulse. That's the uniquely American thing
Right.
musically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that because I remember being, well, I want to be sensitive about it too, but I remember being at a mostly international college and realizing there are people coming to America who have never heard a swung form of music in their entire lives.
Where are they coming from? China?
Well, I want to like specify because that can be.
I already ripped the lid off it. No, you don't have to. We probably shouldn't. So you can just continue.
Just China.
Hey,
I was gonna say
They know what they did. They know they should stop.
These
They know
hands
they should
are-
listen. They know I didn't pay them.
these hands are slippery.
These
slope.
hands are tied.
Hold on. The reason that I say that is because
I'm a bad person.
there, it would be extremely unusual. But the possibility is not out that somebody could grow up in the United States of America and never have heard a form of swung music.
Oh, nowadays.
Nowadays,
yeah,
easy.
Apps easy.
Trap has no swing.
So that's a good example. I meant that.
Well, I mean,
more
actually,
from-
the cadences do, but not the beats. Sorry.
I meant that more from the perspective that there are people
Triplets
who
aren't
grow
swing.
up in very isolated parts of the United
Oh,
States.
yeah, right.
It's especially well, the internet is global, and in an internet age, it's really easy to stay in your bubble.
Since when?
So the
Convenience?
thing I don't-
Yeah.
They got this in Iceland?
The thing I don't want to press is this idea that people from certain parts of the world have no idea what swing
No,
is.
any. I think
I
anybody
mean-
from any part of the world can not have
you have
heard
the
of
access.
that now.
Ostensibly, I mean, you know, all due respect, but there's countries that don't have a lot of access to stuff, so they won't know.
Well, that's
and
true.
They won't know, and it won't be a
That's
function
true.
of their desire to know or not
Right.
to know.
It's not a dig at all. Like I get what you're saying. It's
Here, I think we could hold ourselves accountable though, because there's unlimited access and resources here for most
But
people.
you could make
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
case for anybody from the U.S. who's never heard a legitimate samba, who has never heard real, legit salsa music.
yeah.
You know, because all of that stuff has idiosyncratic phrasing that's central to that
Yeah.
culture. So that would be like the swing pulse for America. In Brazil, it would be like the Brazilian 16th note, which is not quantized perfectly. It's not perfectly.
Yeah, it's got
not
a
phrased
shake.
equidistantly with like an even temperament of space,
Right,
Right.
right.
like we do in the United States.
Just like, what's the name of the little beat that reggaeton is built on? The like, but, what's that one called? Remember? You don't know? I thought you knew
At
all
one
these beats.
point I
but-
knew.
Yeah.
See,
When he was studying,
I get
Let's call it
really,
reggaeton.
I get
Let's go
really,
reggaeton.
I get standoffish with stuff like that because I don't want to come across like somebody who knows everything.
You just come across a standoff.
You just come up with a guy who wants to sing like this. That was fucking fire on the mountain.
Well,
Max takes the
We should take a second and just let it settle. No,
The reason I say that is because a lot of musicians and drummers are really guilty of this in particular. A lot of musicians don't realize how important it is for your development as a player to really understand the history of your instrument and to do that homework.
Shit, everyone's a citizen, and it's important as a citizen to know your fucking history. Nobody does
Exactly.
here, so who gives a fuck? It's like, what? It's just like, you will spend your whole, I mean, that's why the important thing is just pick your battles, and I guess it's all about context. Because you can't go around trying to right the wrongs everywhere, because then everything's a windmill.
Well, yeah.
You're not getting anything done.
And with me bringing up blues, it's one of those things that as a musician, just getting back to this point of like something that someone could hear this as being so simple, and then, you know, other people, it's like the most complex, challenging thing potentially is that it appears that like anybody who's a proficient musician should be able to play the blues accurately or like replicate that, but it's not necessarily so. Because it's like, especially as a guitarist, I think it's like it's really hard to like really nail the feel of like you get what the music's about. And I mean,
Yeah, there's absolutely true.
yeah,
Every style is its own language.
right. You can,
Yeah.
I mean, you can play over blues and you can like solo over it, and yeah, it's gonna sound perfectly fine. But it's like it's not gonna sound the same as somebody who really knows how to play that style and get the feeling behind it.
Blue
And also,
territory.
right, well, literal blue territory with talking about
It's
this,
the
but
difference between somebody who's fluent versus a native speaker.
right. And so yeah, it's just I don't know. It's thinking about it like, is that all related to technique? Because someone who and that's where
No,
like
it's expression of
and
technique.
that's I don't know, and that's the whole thing about this is like understanding what makes the esoteric what it is. It's like I mean, to me, it's like the mystique of that is not an excuse of like I don't want to learn about it. To me, it's the same way that like the more you keep practicing, there's just a deeper well of like I don't think you're ever going to get an answer to that, and that's where the magic is really.
Yeah.
Well, if we want to get
I have
back,
answers.
if we want to get back to the blue thing, like we could talk about, you know, before the internet, technique wise, there was even different cultural ways, like in percussion, to hold sticks.
Even with
Like there was a French grip and there was a German grip and there was all these things, and maybe that wasn't necessarily translatable between
Different mallet
cultures,
grips.
different mallet grips. And you know, talking about it now, when we go back to like the terms of like playing aggressively or playing you're too fluffy or things like that, even within groups of musicians who speak the same language, those terms might not mean the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you know, there was, you know, going back to John, there was a thing he would tell the guitarist to do is like, oh, you know, play footballs. It's like, what does that mean?
bass players too. Yeah.
It's like these, you know, these round, like open chords. I guess, you know, it's like throwing a football spiral. It's like you've got these like, I guess that's the visual thing. It's so much of
But
musical
again-
terms are like visual concepts.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like things that
But
you
that's
can,
and that's the reason why is because they're highly idiomatic. Now you're making an even smaller vehicle to convey a whole lot of information that again, I was like, for some reason my brain is always like, you know, I do think in those and like and when you try to be funny you have to traffic in them, but at the end of the day, when I'm learning something like music and I always think of it as learning, I'm like, I always want to break it down into something that could be like expressed like just scientifically in a way. You know what I
I'm the
mean?
same
It
way.
is neutral in the way you could disseminate the idea.
Do you guys feel
That makes
like
it clear.
you're a native speaker in any particular styles?
Hell's yeah.
Like when it comes to just like if somebody came down and was like, Davey Sipes, play me your bread and butter. What's your go-to genre style? What is it
My go-to genre
that
style
you feel like
is
you've got in your back pocket, like ready to go?
I think that it would be like sort of like abstract and maybe a little experimental sounding, but ultimately kind of jazz inflected. I think would be the way I'd say it. It's like it's not a pure jazz, but it's something that would remind you mostly like jazz in the sense of like the approach, there's spontaneity to it, and the languages I tend to work in melodic wise would probably be more note filled in some way, and so that's the
makes
way
sense.
I think I would try to, I think it would convey that way. If I was gonna say like if you asked me about my songs, I say they were like prog rock if like we're talking about songs, because the songs are like instead of taking just a moment of spontaneity, that's when I take that moment of spontaneity and go over it like 30 times until it becomes something I feel like, because it's just like a shot in a movie to me, because I'm obsessed with movies. It's like, is it going to be like 4 beats long, you know, this particular dolly shot, or is it going to be a 10-second long dolly tracking shot? The longer you walk with the character, the more that has to matter that you're doing it. You see what I mean? And that's how I feel about like the notes too. For me, I always feel much more confident expressing a bunch of notes in a small amount of space or in a weird amount of space, you know?
Okay.
And that to me feels like the language of jazz.
More in the jazz.
Yeah, like syncopation would definitely be.
What about you, Max?
Oh man.
What's your bread and butter go-to if you could only, the one thing that you go like, I got that down?
You know, I'm probably a terrible person to ask this because I've never felt fully engrossed and comfortable in like one style of music. I would say.
Do you want me to do with this? Eat it? Happy birthday
like
to
where
the
this is
ground.
going.
I would say growing up, it was rock. It was rock and jazz. It's a twist top. You know, you can just.
Oh,
Neanderthal.
No, wait.
Absolute savage.
I'd say it was jazz and rock. Like the first music that really like spoke to me was probably jazz, and then it was like minimalist classical music, which like really informed my composition. And then it's always been like growing up listening to music, classic rock, and then going into like prog rock, and I mean like 70s prog rock.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like Yes and King Crimson, and
The
Gentle
weird
Giant and stuff, the weird shit. So like now it's like my playing is just kind of an amalgamation of all that, and it's I just try to fit. I just try to fit into whatever genre I'm playing. So it's hard for me to say like I'm a native of this.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of maybe an American syndrome in general for most musicians. But
Matt?
That's a hard question for me, but the way that I like to think about it is I think of myself as primarily being a student of American music. And everything that kind of entails what has made up American music. So getting to that and I'm always trying to learn more. I'm always going deeper, but trying to get way into the weeds of what the constituents of American music have been. So blues music, gospel, jazz, obviously, pop, disco, rock and roll. And when I say rock and roll, I don't mean cock rock. I mean real rock and roll.
Dad, what's cock rock?
well,
Real rock.
The two genres love each other very much.
We're talking real rock and roll.
No, that
Hey,
makes sense.
that's
to
a high
me.
five.
It feels
You earned it.
familiar with
You earned it.
your playing and where you're coming from.
But also the more unfamiliar sides of that, Dixieland music,
I'm wrong to do it too.
Americana,
Yeah.
getting to the roots of like what the drum set was
Look at that.
before it became
Mongoloid instrument.
the way that we think of a drum set. When a drum set was
Here, I'll
still
swing
a trap set, and it wasn't
A bunch of percussion instruments
literally
set up for one person to
Yeah.
play.
literally
Yeah.
an amalgamation of separate
Yeah.
instruments that were traditionally played
By
by a percussion
separate people.
ensemble.
Yep.
Be played by a singular person.
right.
And getting into how that changed music when the trap set became a thing. So
Was that last pandemic, a lot of people died, and then they ran out of the percussion section. They're like, "Hey, Lester, can you like hit all of them at once? drag them to the corner and bang them all at once."
So that includes big band music and also the Americanized form of salsa that came from the big band era.
Oh, right.
Mambo. All of those
Yeah.
things.
Number
the things that,
No, it's Italiano.
not to say that Mambo is an inherently American
Baby loves Mambo.
thing, It's just that people kind of forget there was a massive cultural revolution of the integration of salsa music into American jazz.
Oh, dude, in the
was.
40s, they were crazy for everything like Latin and Afro-Cuban and
Yep.
shit.
Right.
There's like my son is obsessed with Three Caballeros, which is just like all it is about like it's all about like mariachi and like folklorico and shit. And then they have the Brazilian section. It's all about samba and the crazy parrot. That parrot rules. I want to party with Joe karaoke.
But that also goes, through psychedelic rock and all of those
Yeah,
things.
absolutely.
I try to think of myself as a student of the complete or ever more complete image of what it means to be an American
Musician.
Yeah.
Do you like American music?
Well,
Of course.
I guess
do
we
you
we
like
all-
American music?
Yeah.
that's such a
Baby.
broad
That
question.
also includes country.
Violent Femmes.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
includes
Yeah.
country.
Yeah, I love
and-
country.
But all of that being said, I love music from everywhere else in the world too.
Right.
It just happens to be, Brazilian music is one of the biggest loves of my life.
Hmm.
I'm not the most legit guy
Right.
playing Brazilian music. Am I more legit than probably like certain percentage of the guys out here? Probably.
If you're working on it,
but
sure.
that bar is not particularly high because of where we live. There's not a whole lot of Brazilian music going on in the Antelope Valley.
No.
Well, yeah, but it's just not like.
Thirst to
Well, I
quench on
wonder.
that, too.
I wonder if the better question then, and I still think you should answer your own question
You definitely
as
can.
well
You
when we
I'm
get
working
around
on
to you. But we'll get to you later.
Strong host energy.
But maybe the better question is like not necessarily like what form of music you feel more native in, because especially now maybe this could have been answered easier like 100 years ago. But maybe it's more like what form of music do you feel more comfortable playing in, or what form of music do you get the most enjoyment from playing?
I would.
Because we've all played in a bunch of different types of bands,
Yeah,
and different
Settings.
genres. So.
I mean,
that's
cover
easy for
band,
me.
You're going to be covering a lot of different categories on
Yeah.
its
So
own.
like for me, like funk, like I really enjoy playing funk.
Yeah.
In a band setting, like I don't get the opportunity to play, prog rock
solo.
in a live
Oh,
setting
sure,
all the
sure,
time,
yeah.
but like funk,
You want to play Gentle Giant? You got to start your own band.
yeah,
You're
pretty
gonna
much.
yeah, shit.
I gotta find
And
first. I
book
gotta
some
find
UK
people who
shit.
know who Gentle Giant is
Yeah,
and who enjoy
like-
listening to Gentle Giant.
and then form a fucking band on
And
top
form
of
a
that.
band. Like, those people have to be good at playing at their instruments as well. Like, at that point,
Gotta have a wizard's robe to play that shit. I agree with that too, because when you were asking that question, there's music that I really enjoy listening to and I really like, but I wouldn't necessarily be the guy you would hire for that, And as much as like you're more of a hip hop head than I am, but like part of my practice regimen, hip I don't know. Anyway, hip hop head.
Put me in that box. That's fine.
Triple
Yeah.
H right there.
Like part of my bass playing routine was like I would take hip hop tracks and practice to them if they had like a good bass line. Like Hypnotize from Notorious B.I.G. is one of them. Like Snoop Dogg stuff off of like Doggy Style is another one. Where like it's the same bass line over and over again. So it's
Right, because
it's
where do they really come from, though?
well, right, actual bass lines.
Yeah.
But you have to practice them over and over again, play them consistently, exactly the same way because they're sampled. You have to also not get bored.
Oh, I see your
Because you can
point.
hear the fatigue and like if you play something exactly the
I
same
remember
for 5 minutes. Yeah. So you're not going to hire me for a hip hop gig.
I would.
As much. Oh, yeah, well, that's kind of
God, dude, talk about a style of music with a just depth of idiom.
Yeah.
It's just hip hop.
right.
Mad idioms.
Yeah.
In answer to the question, as stereotypical as it would be, I would say rock first and foremost, and that's pretty much any style. So like anything from Chuck Berry to I know.
I don't even get that impression from you, man.
Yeah, what gave that away?
I thought you were the classical oboist.
I played the fucking harp, dude.
You're the harpist from Boston
that-
Pops.
This guy a rock guy?
Yeah, freaking back row harpist
The
guy.
harp's a
over here.
wicked pisser, dude.
Ah, wicked
Gonna
pisser.
pluck the shit out of that
He
motherfucker.
Yeah. No, it's not a queer instrument.
I'm gonna make that sound all mystical and shit.
I make it sound wicked nice.
Yeah.
You want to go to Dunkin' at the beginning?
All right.
All right.
Back to the
Sorry,
past.
Boston. All right.
Like, I don't know. I'd say like what I enjoy most and what I would probably get hired for would be rock. Isn't necessarily what I enjoy the most all the time, but I would say rock and all styles within that.
Yeah.
Blues is a short, like is a a really close.
is shorter
you know,
than rock?
Well, no, it's close second place, not short.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's right behind there as far as enjoyment of playing and what I usually get asked to do, and then right behind that would be like R&B and funk, which is like any of the Motown stuff,
Yeah.
Stax Volt stuff, because all those players are a huge influence on me, not just the bass players of that. So like James Jamerson, Duck Dunn, Steve Cropper, Steve Jordan, like
Yeah.
you know, all those people are huge influences on me.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Or even like getting into funk, like electro stuff in the 80s, so like Zapp and Roger, go-go stuff from DC, like Trouble Funk, all that stuff is great.
Yeah.
Right, so that would be like anything I would say you could hire me for, as far as what, even like me saying like, oh yeah, I'm a native speaker of that, it's like, I feel a little bit pretentious in saying that,
Right,
because
right,
I feel like I'm not done. Even with English, it's like, yeah, I've grown up, but I'm learning to speak English every day.
Oh, you
And
write
y-
it better than you speak it.
Keep that fucking for sure. Fucking
lot
for
better.
sure.
Keep this in mind, though. There are a lot of people.
Check out Jesse's articles.
There are a lot of people who are native speakers of the English language who are not well spoken.
Who are not well spoken at all.
Ain't that the rightest shit you ever said?
Yeah. I guess what I meant
Now is
more
the
by
time
that.
to now's the segment where
That's
in the
segment.
show where we can
No,
hear
it's
your
a great
response.
point.
No,
Yeah. 7 years later.
What I meant more by that was like when you hear yourself on a recording session, like through a Pro Tool session, let's just say, and you're playing along to something, there are going to be certain types of music where you're going to listen back to yourself and you're going to go, yeah, that actually sounds pretty good right there. I mean, there's always going to be something that you're going to catch on to that you need to improve on or beat yourself up on, whatever. But there's certain types of music that you're going to play that you're going to go, yeah, that sounds pretty natural. And then you're going to record some things that you're going to go, dude, that sounds like shit on that. And it's not like you're a worse player in going from that rock tune to that contemporary like Adele track or something like that. But I do feel like there are certain styles of play that are going to come
Right.
more naturally to you.
But you could also make the argument that maybe you are a worse player when you move on to those things because I mean
David.
once you do that you're
David.
Perhaps you have more to work on.
You got,
son.
you got the heart and the soul. You just don't have the talent.
Oh.
because
Chef from South
Yes,
Park.
yes.
everybody has had that experience of being out of their depth.
Oh yeah.
Playing wise. So when there's a point at which you traverse into what's essentially a new idiom and a new language, and you know it's like it's like how certain languages can be completely different from each other, but their roots are very similar. And so you have certain languages that are loosely cross-compatible with each other, right? That people can still be speaking in their native language, and there are enough similarities that someone can understand what that other person is saying. I saw it a lot when I was in school. Like people from Brazil could loosely understand a lot of Spanish. and
Right.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot of crossover.
so that happens a lot with genres too, where there's a lot of crosstalk
Yeah.
between idioms, and the stronger you are in one of those constituent parts of what you're playing, especially if there are multiple types of music that are being melded together, you know, your floor of overall proficiency is going to be higher than if you understood neither of them.
Right.
Maybe native speaker of a genre is
Yeah.
the wrong word.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I agree.
the only way we
Aboriginal speaker of a genre. It's much more sensitive.
No. Like listening
I'm
to your
the only
guys'
person that knows
response
didgeridoo
midway
here.
through, I realized like, yeah, that's not really
That's
the
fair.
correct phrasing on that.
because you know like
That's a good point.
But I want you to finish that thought.
I mean we're
I want to
Yes.
hear what you were going with that.
But yeah, I was just gonna say real quick, like the only way that we could be a native speaker of a specific genre is if we whenever we were growing up, what was hot at the time, and that's like what we were super into, and that's what we were playing. Like that could be our native language.
Or what you were exposed to by way of your family or people around you.
Right. I mean, like that, or just like what you were always playing, like what you gravitated towards, like.
Because dude, when I was like 4 and 5 years old, I thought Glenn Campbell and like I thought that stuff was current. Because I basically grew up in my grandparents' house because both of my parents worked. So I was listening to big band music on my great grandfather's record player all day.
That
And I
makes
thought
sense.
that's
what music was
music.
today.
Right.
Huh.
But you didn't grow up learning how to play that type of music.
No, I didn't. But
I would say the only thing that relates for us would be like when I started playing music, and it was like I don't know, Incubus and you know, other bands like that, and that's like what I was learning to play with my friends in band settings. And like maybe that could be considered my native music if that was like something that I would, that genre of rock,
Yeah.
right? If that was something,
An Incubus.
yeah.
I like
Well, you know, that style of that's a specific style of rock.
It absolutely is.
Nickelback,
Yeah, no.
Nickelback, you know, and
But that being
Stained
said,
and Creed,
Disturbed.
Trapped.
I think
yeah.
a lot of that
Headstrong!
Limp Bizkit.
Headstrong!
Shame Biscuit.
Yeah, we had to thank you. See, I stuck up for
love
Limp
Limp
Bizkit
Bizkit.
last
Man's a
episode.
poet.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what you are
Fred Durst
exposed
entertained us
to
all.
Yeah.
as a kid does make up a lot of your musical makeup, though, and it kind of does
sure.
form your concepts.
Oh sure, but
It's
you
the
know,
foundation.
I grew up on classic rock because that's all my parents would play.
Right.
But also they would also play Yes, and they would also play big band stuff because my grandparents were into that, and I was also opera. So it's
Right.
it's not like one genre. Maybe a better example would be as if you grew up in like. And I'm not shaming the Deep South because I have heritage there as well as being Jewish.
Heritage.
He's a deep South Jew, everybody watch out.
But you know, my dad plays guitar and banjo, and there's a lot of country influence there. And
Yeah.
you know, specifically where we live, there's a lot of country influence.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can
Out
even talk
here.
about like the music as a kid that molded me, because as a kid, my parents were split between like the hip hop of my mom and the rock and roll and classic rock and metal side of my dad. And growing up, I never cared for the rock. I never cared for metal. My dad would listen to it, and it would not resonate with me at all. But the hip hop stuff and the R&B stuff, that I loved until Guitar Hero 1 came out. And I played that because I was really into rhythm games, and a friend brought over Guitar Hero 1, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, because, you know, I was just playing the new thing at the time. And up until then, in 2005, 2006, I did not listen to rock or metal. And it was that one game alone that made me go, oh, wait a minute, I really like this. And my entire music, like, love and interest completely shifted. It's not like I don't listen to that same stuff that I loved as a kid and hear it now and go like, ugh, I don't like I still do, but where I am now as a person, like, it started with me at like 13, 14, 15 years old, whenever that fucking was.
I think that's an interesting thing to bring up because there is something for musicians that you may not like something until you play it.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah.
And it's that. I never really liked classical music all that much until I started learning it and playing it.
Yeah.
And then I understood it. I think it's the same thing with sports too. Like, I find sports way more enjoyable if you understand what's going on.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's because
100%.
of the communal element of playing that music with other people?
Partly, it's also just like experiencing it in a different way. It's also how much you're exposed to it. If it's the only thing around, like when jazz was prevalent and it was like the music to listen to, everybody was listening to jazz. But these days, jazz, especially in America, I mean, it's not very popular in America anymore. But the only people who really listen to it are jazz musicians. And I feel like that's because they play it.
Or that outlier demographic of people who do just like and listening to jazz.
They still just like it.
But the people who listen to the people who listen to popular radio are not going to go seek out jazz.
Not traditionally, no.
No.
It's because it's not around. But maybe if that person learned music and then played it, they would form an appreciation of it.
Well, I think there's something to be said for both of those things because my growing up, like I kind of grew up the same way you did, where it's like my parents weren't necessarily listening to like contemporary stuff, and so like as a kid, way before I even started playing music, the biggest things I listened to as far as like what was consistently on was Elvis Presley. That was the first one, so like that was the most consistent, I would say. Some classic rock filtering in weird places, like seeing Alice Cooper on The Muppet Show. And I remember being fixated by that and going, what's that? And then the other thing, and I was going to say this will add to it. The third being, like, I would say doo-wop stuff, but particularly the coasters and anything Dr. Demento, like those compilations, like the 20th anniversary and 30th anniversary ones.
Dr. Demento is when I first heard Zappa.
Yeah, same. Dancing Fool. Yeah. And so, like, I was like, and Weird Al, that was like my first artist I ever went nuts for was Weird Al. That, like, I remember when, because I heard Saga Begins, the song about, episode 1, the whole Star Wars thing, making fun of American Pie. I heard that song and I listened to it over and over and over again. And eventually got to the point where, like, when I was going to the store with my mom as a kid, I wasn't asking, like, for toys and like, oh, can you buy this? I would go to the CD section and go, oh, I have this Weird Al album. Yeah, can I get it, please?
I think I had a Dr. Demento cassette that I wore out.
Yeah, I had the CDs. I had the CDs of those. But so like, I don't know. I've always kind of sought out weird music since then, or music that even if it's mainstream that people know who it is, it's kind of weird. Like I love Zappa. I love Captain Beefheart. I love Parliament Funkadelic. I love the Stooges. I love anything that's weird. Like for local stuff, Tone in Georgia, like they're one of my favorites. They're
feel
weird.
that.
But I hear all of that in your playing.
Yeah, I'm a weirdo.
I can see that you're playing.
If you want me to answer, I don't have a go-to thing. When I listen to myself play, or if I play on other things, I don't know. I just hear me. I don't hear a rock player or this player or anything. Like I don't even. I love playing rock stuff. I truly I love playing rock, especially metal. But when I hear back myself playing in bands or just on a Pro Tool session, I don't hear, damn, that's some good metal playing right there.
What?
I just hear playing.
Yo, on
But
this
it's-
place is a zoo. That is some fucking metal,
That's-
bro.
Yeah, but that's because that's me. That's me in my own band, in my own situation.
that's
If I'm doing
metal.
cover stuff, or if I'm just playing to a song on the track in my headphones, running it just through microphones, the microphones aren't hearing the song. It's just picking up me playing to another drummer playing to the song that's already recorded. And I think that, for me, it's really going to come down to drummer, because it's not like I play any rock song and it's just like, damn, there it is. That's some good rock playing. I'll identify more drummer to drummer with some drummers that I'm just more comfortable with, that we kind of see things eye to eye with, the world of music.
Yeah.
I play those tracks and I'm like, damn, that sounds like the track right there.
Yeah.
Not like the drummer, but it feels like the track.
Well, I would also say that musicians are pretty bad at categorizing themselves anyway.
Oh yeah.
Especially when you like more than, I don't know, 4 things, like
Yeah.
we all do anyway.
It does takes an outside ear to be like, oh, you sound like this person, or like I've had that a couple times where people have told me like, oh, you sound a lot like this, or you play a lot like this person, or this
reminds
type
me
of
of,
music. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Like you get that from me?
But like for this place as a zoo, that's one sound that I'm getting creatively myself on. But Rogue is like completely different, feels like song to song. One song I can be completely comfortable with, another like Alabama. It's a 3/4 like soul ballad to where
Working title.
I mean, yeah, Working Title Alabama. It's a 3/4 like
3/4 Soul Ballad is a pretty
swing
good title.
Yeah,
ballad
dude. I hit that same time.
that it's my own it's my own band, so that should be able to translate just like it does in This Place Zoo. However, that band is completely song to song. There are some styles that will like pull up with like in writing that I feel completely natural in, and then another where I actually have to like work on that song because I wrote it and I wrote it to the feel of the song correctly, to my own version of correctness, but it still doesn't have that like, it's not just as tight as I want it, or it's not that, and it feels like somebody else almost.
I'm curious because you mentioned like the hip hop influence from your mom side, and that's the first time I've heard of that, and like all the times I play with that, I've never like picked up anything like hip hop from you. But I mean, do you think that there's a big influence in your playing from that?
No.
So you don't think you took like any aspect of that music into your playing?
Still love listening to that music, but if I play on top of those tracks, it's not gonna feel like a hip hop track in any way, shape, or form. Not even close. It's not even gonna feel like,
Was there
you
ever-
sound like a rocker playing on a hip hop track. Nope, not
Was
even
there
that.
ever a point that you like tried to play that, or like tried to rap or be
No.
or anything like that?
No, I just do drums.
Right.
But just as far
Fair
as like
enough.
my actual playing, but that's where I wanted to bring this up. I hear when he's talking about, I grew up on this and I love this and blah, 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 blah. That's you, Jesse. It's you.
That's your sound like.
I hear all of that in your playing. We all do. We hear those bits of
We hear it. That's why we got together today to talk to you,
We
Jesse.
hear it already.
This isn't a podcast. This is an intervention.
It is.
There's nothing that you really said that made any of us go like, really? Whoa, that's crazy. Like if you just threw out like a bunch of like old jazz basses or something, it would have been like, that's interesting, but okay.
Yeah, no, I think Paul Chambers is a brilliant bass player, but he's not an influence.
But he's not an
on-
Yeah.
influence.
Yeah.
But nobody really was like, oh, that's weird. All of my influences, you guys don't really hear like, oh yeah, I hear the that in your playing. At least to where I'm sitting, like listening to my own playing, I don't hear all of my influences wrapped up into one.
I kind of feel the same way. I feel like people would actually be kind of hard pressed to tell like what I grew up playing.
I think that's true for most people. I mean, I told you I have a big influence of mine is minimalist classical music, but I don't think you would hear me play and go, oh, he sounds like Steve Reich or Philip Glass.
I don't know who those motherfuckers are.
You know the time when it really stuck
You've
out
heard
to
them
me?
in movie type
When
shit,
like
though.
that element of your playing as a drummer really stuck out to me is when we did that Bjork song for Test Flight. What was it? Wanderlust.
Oh, yeah.
And the way like
Oh,
you approached
yeah.
and orchestrated that song.
I was on the sound crew when you guys did that. That was a dope song.
I'd say when it comes to your playing though, like I can hear your study for the history of the instrument in
That's
your
the
playing.
thing though. A lot of the thing that people hear of my playing is from way after I started playing. Because that's the stuff that really resonated strong in me.
Right.
Like the first drummer I ever heard that like my mom ever showed to me. I didn't know it, she didn't know it, but it was Steve Gadd playing with James Taylor.
Okay.
And then my dad showed me stuff. And I heard Foots for the first time when I was like 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like how interesting that was that my dad was into that band because he didn't really listen to a lot of music.
Right.
Interesting.
Well,
That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that-
I think John Bonham was like the first noticeable drummer in my like childhood listening.
Yeah.
The first
Phil
time I ever
Collins,
thought to myself, who
Genesis.
is this
Nice.
drummer?
Yeah.
Was Stuart Copeland.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another big one from my
Makes
childhood,
sense
too.
to
Well,
you.
Yeah,
Man.
and again for me, like going with no fucking surprise and the stereotypical answer, mine was John Entwistle because I
Thunder.
fucking get quartered. You've been quartered.
You've been quartered, boy.
Can we start calling you like Thunderfingers Jr. or something?
Sure. I mean, shit, I'll take it.
What's that his nickname?
Yeah, Thunderfingers Jr.
Thunderfingers?
I guess
Yeah.
it'll be Thunderfingers third.
Yeah, that and the ox.
I think it was, right? Yeah, something like
It's
that.
something like
Something like Thunderfinger.
I'm probably terribly wrong.
No, the ox was like the main one, but I think he was also known as Thunderfingers.
Thunderfinger.
Yeah, but that came about because I wanted to play guitar because my dad played guitar, and I heard him playing guitar all the time. So he was like my main influence more than anybody else was in wanting to be a musician. And then when it came time to actually starting a band, it was because I saw School of Rock with Jack Black, and I went with my buddy Seth, and we were both in middle school at the time, and like I was already getting into music. It was already kind of like slowly starting to listen to more music than like just whatever's on as a kid. It was like was becoming my thing, and that movie hit me at like the perfect time where it was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And it was just, I don't know, it was just a perfect convergence of all of that stuff. And so
It's that old now, huh?
yeah, 2003. I was in the movie theater when it came out. And so I bought tickets via dial-up internet, and I went to the movie theater.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I think it was DSL at the time.
call
Anyway,
my
this isn't a
local
fucking
cinema.
internet podcast. It's a music podcast.
Are you sure?
Yeah. So, but I started a band with my buddies Adam and Seth, and we had 3 guitar players, no drummer, no singer. And so
Sweet.
they both they both being
three
more
more guitars
confident
than I want.
outvoted me at the time, and they go, well, we need a bass player, so you should play bass. And I got actually upset. Like I was like, I don't want to play bass, I want to play guitar. And so and so I was just like, I didn't know anything about bass because like all I knew was guitar from like hearing that in songs of my dad. But in listening to rock and getting into that at the time, The Who was like, that was the first bass player I went, oh, it was my generation. And I went, oh, okay, like there actually is something to like, it's not just, root notes, right? And so that
To this day, no one will let him play guitar.
every time he picks one up, no.
They just clip off 2 strings.
Right. So I don't know. That was the beginning of it for me, and just hearing somebody actually, because I was huge into AC/DC at the time already. That was one of my favorite bands, and so the bass on that wasn't appealing because it was just meat and potato. It was just the root note, like it's just the AC/DC bass track. Hearing somebody actually like solo and create something, even if it's just little riffs, in between the band, was actually like, oh, you can get creative with this. And even though that wasn't the articulate thought, it was more like, oh, that was cool. And like, that was the extent of it. And then I actually just started to listen to like bass players and got into like Red Hot Chili Peppers after that and all the stuff you get into at that age.
I can
You
identify.
sound like
Dude,
that, though.
The only reason,
Spit take. Almost got a spit take, I think.
the only reason I play the drums is because Chris my
roped
brother,
you into it.
told my grandparents to buy me a drum set
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
because I was an angry little kid.
I believe it.
Playing
He's a
guitar.
sage motherfucker, man. He always was. He's
He was
smart.
playing guitar and nobody played drums.
He's like, I need a drummer. This kid needs an outlet. Let's do this.
You
Well,
guys.
I wanted to play tuba.
Nuh-uh.
And
Really?
yeah, I wanted to play the
I
tuba.
never knew
Jesus
that.
And
Christ.
then we're like, well, let's maybe get something more readily available and easier, like the drums. And then my parents were like, yeah, but we're gonna make you learn percussion first instead of learn how to read music. I think that's probably was my
Which was an
grandparents'
interesting take.
influence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. You may want to explain that because
Oh,
We'll leave it for the next one. You'd be mysterious.
my grandfather was for 50 years the musical director for Wilshire Boulevard Temple and a very prominent Jewish music composer. And my grandma was a opera singer who sang in Vienna for a while. So prestigious grandparents.
Mm-hmm. And cool people.
whose
cool.
influence like trickled down through your mom, who is not a
Oh, for sure.
musician.
But she lets things trickle.
She's a good singer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She can play some chords.
Yeah. I think if there's anything we could take away from this podcast today, the world is a sadder place because you didn't decide to pursue the tuba.
Hey!
There's still time.
There's still time.
There's still time.
There's still plenty of
Let
time.
me ask this then. Do your top 5 I like to call them desert island albums.
Oh boy.
Oh, this.
Do they represent? Are they a clear and accurate representation of where you are as a player today? No. Mine are.
What, like the
21.
shit you want to listen to?
What's up?
The shit you want to listen to, like Desert Island discs, you mean? Right?
Like albums that your top 5 trapped on a desert island. You got nothing else. What will you never ever get bored of? Because they are who you are.
yeah,
My top 5: 21 by Adele, Altered State
album.
by
That's interesting.
Altered State by Tesseract,
what?
Scenes from a Memory, Dream Theater, Rust in Peace, Megadeth, Fear Inoculum, Tool.
Really?
Do you hear? Yes. Do you hear those 5 albums as me as a player?
I just get
Because-
upset when
no.
I hear on anybody's top 5.
I mean, you're hearing. You just. I just said
Adele-
21,
Adele-
and you went, whoa.
Yeah, but the way, but I think about it, and like that's weird enough for you to have as a desert, as a desert
I
island album.
I
like,
never get tired
Hey.
of that album. It's my favorite.
He
fucking
won't
album.
go. You know?
I won't go.
Yeah.
God
Can't do
bless
it on his
Tiny
own.
Tim. Chris Gaines' greatest hits.
Oh!
Yeah, that's you, Jesse. That's you.
Because I want to be
Are you trying to
frustrated.
torture the other people?
mine would probably be now. That's what I call music volume 2.
Yeah! Fuck yeah!
Oh, 1 through 5. That's some good 90s boppers.
Hells yeah. That's got Kylie Minogue on
Does
there.
anybody know what number that's up to now?
I think it's on
Fucking 11.
69.
Hell yeah! High five to the world. Dude, they got
Fucking find out.
to whatever double that is.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. They're still making those.
No, they're
I'll
definitely
take
making
that.
those.
Now that's what I call music volume 22. Kids Pop version 12. I don't know.
Oh, music.
It's
I
really
don't know.
weird.
I've never-
Kids Bop weirds me out. Always will.
Have you
yeah,
guys
it's
actually
fucking
thought
weird.
about that?
That's a question.
Top
I would
5
never
albums?
do.
Top 5
Yeah, all the
desert
time.
albums?
It's easy though.
Because I don't know if I could pick.
I would never.
Oh,
I
think
thought about it a
it's
lot
like the
because
same
I think
fucking
it's
5 t-shirts
fucking
I wear,
weird.
dude. No, it's easy.
My top
you're
5
not-
favorite albums are just
I could do it.
not what
easy.
you'd expect.
Easy.
I would have to go with the cornerstone first of like, I've never gotten sick of it, and that's Dark Side of the Moon. So, because that was the record that kind of opened my mind up to just actually like.
That's a safe choice.
Well, it's a safe choice, but I don't listen to it a lot,
76.
but I've listened to it for so long, it never gets old
Very
for
valid
me.
choice. Safe
Now
choice.
that's what I
Very
call
valid
music.
choice.
76
Holy
is the
shit.
answer.
Thanks. man.
Thanks.
Hey.
I just wanted the people to know.
Co-producer. There you
I've
go.
been around for 76 years, so
Yeah.
No, they
They
just
put out like
released
7 a
multiples.
year, right?
Yeah,
It's like in
God.
dog years.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Without getting too heavy into it, I would probably overthink this question, and I would come up with a bunch of different. If I really had time to pick, I would probably pick one that was like I haven't really
Take
been
it
able to
long.
wrap my head around. So it'd be "Bitches Brew" from Miles Davis would be the second one because there's so much to digest on it that it would at least give me like something to really look forward to. With like these are the only 5 albums you can listen to for the rest of your life. I would say I would need something like really funky in there, so I'd probably pick some sort of Funkadelic or Parliament record or James Brown, like Revolution of the Mind, something funk category for the third one. Fourth one would probably be something really heavy that I wouldn't get sick of because I would get really frustrated that I only have 5 fucking albums to listen to. I need something really angry to listen to.
I'm not even frustrated with my 5. That's the thing.
I'd
Yeah,
probably
no,
say
I'm totally stoked.
I'd probably say Funhouse from the Stooges, or I would say, I don't know, just something really fucking heavy that I could get behind. And then one,
have a top
and
five.
then the fifth one would be a brand new album I'd never heard before, just be based on the cover art. And hopefully I like it because I
All
like
right,
to
who wants to go
gamble.
next? Because I'm enraged. I can't follow that.
I could think of.
See, you waste a pick.
I don't know if I could pick
You waste
5,
Absolutely.
but I could do like Proclamation from Gentle Giant. Some fucking They Might Be Giants album.
Oh, that's a good one.
Another Giants?
Yeah, but
they
completely
might-
different giants.
Some big boys out
They
there.
might be gentle giants at the end of the day.
I'd probably do Birth of the Cool.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard.
I was only able to answer because I've thought of it for like a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had time.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
Actually, on the island.
Yeah. Just fucking sitting in my own brain. Just,
maybe
what would I choose?
maybe it's some Stravinsky.
Okay.
Ooh, left field.
And then
Love me some Vinsky.
and then I don't know. I'd have to have something that's just like a good time. That's not so like.
So listen heavy.
Yeah, something good in there.
My shit's balanced. I got fucking prog shit in there. I got
Right? That's
Adele
part
shit.
of
I
my
got
thing is like I want to
Megadeth.
feel somewhat balanced.
Yeah, I
But I mean, mine's
a
are
balanced
kind of always
diet.
been the same
Yeah.
for a long time. But I'm not gonna reveal mine for personal reasons. They're kind of religious. It has to do with the beard too.
Yeah.
Are you looking stuff up?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay,
remember
while
the
he's doing
name
that,
of the
I'll
song.
rattle off mine real quick. So definitely,
Hit it.
Ruby Vroom by Soul Coughing, Relationship of Command by At the Drive-In, Colors by Between the Buried and Me,
Oh fuck yes!
Post by Bjork.
You know the
and-
remastering and remixing that one?
Which one? Oh, they are the
Yeah.
colors. That's fine by me.
Yeah, they remixed everything from their first album all the way up till Great Misdirect.
Hell's yeah. Oh, which is it's just I want to put that on this list, but instead I'm gonna have to slip an apostrophe. Frank Zappa.
Some Zappy Zap.
None of my jazz, none of my classical,
Yeah.
none of the shit I was raised playing,
No, no,
none of
I
the shit
feel
I
it.
have a degree in.
I feel it.
We're talking Desert Island, and these are the things I'd want to always be
What's
like
the thing that
always
you will
in.
never get bored of?
Exactly.
Ever, ever, ever.
I've listened to those things like cajillions of times, and not only am I not bored, I'm just like I'm excited to talk about them.
Yeah, and you put it on and you're just like,
I-
oh,
I
hell yeah.
have
I'm
a
not going,
chub
I
right
mean, I'll
now.
just listen to this, I
Well, yeah.
guess.
That's
Yeah,
like I love.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like I love Funhouse. I know that there'd be one day where I'd really need to chop some wood to build a fire, and I would get like just frustrated. I would have to do that in the first place, so
you
I
fucking
could,
go.
I could hack that forest down for sure.
That's when you need some. See, that's when you get frustrated. That's when I almost want to put Harry Belafonte on the list. Because like when you're having a bad day, if you put on like Harry Belafonte and like those silly calypso
Jamaica
records,
Farewell, great song.
yeah, dude, I'm telling you, those things put you in the right. Like Beetlejuice, it made perfect sense when he did that in the movie because I'm like, nothing changes the tenor of a fucking tense moment like that kind of music. Like everybody's like, oh, come on, you
Yeah.
got to relax and start dancing. We got to do a
got
conga
yours.
Rose. You know what I mean?
He's thinking about it.
Maybe I'll take a Square Pusher album with me too.
Ooh.
Yeah, see, that would honestly be
Okay, I can
rad.
think of a few. So
That's in the
definitely-
dinghy.
Definitely Seven Summoner's Tales, Sting.
Wow,
Okay.
great,
Um,
great album. If I ever lose my faith in you,
Surprisingly enough, Country Son, Miles Davis.
Okay.
There's a Brazilian album I really love. It's Elis Regina, and it's it's like Elis
Don't fuck it up.
Liger. It's a Brazilian title, but God, there's so many good songs on it.
How do you spell that?
how do you do a little curly thing on the A's?
He's Brazilian.
Sao Paulo?
Frampton Comes Alive. Next.
The Leprechaun, Chick Corea.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Some Chuck. Chuck Courier.
God, I'm trying to think.
Chuck Corea.
Probably Waking the Fallen, Avenged Sevenfold.
Ah!
That's an important one for you.
Yeah,
I know that.
Yeah.
Oh,
but there's too many.
Yeah. They're
I mean, I just thought like I never fucking get tired of Discipline, King Crimson.
King Crimson. Yeah.
Man.
See, for me, it'd be hard not to put Lark's Tongues on there, but yeah, it's in the dinghy. I'm dragging
Yeah.
it along because I got 5 extra records behind.
That's one of those
You bring all those albums along and then you got to rifle through them because you got to
Because I got them
Yeah.
doubled. Yeah.
Not for me.
and then you got to
Actually,
push
yeah.
all
Like,
the rest
I'm
out to sea.
so-
Yeah, that's right, like,
Let 'em
I'm
fight.
so set on my 5 that like it is unchanged unless like a new album comes along and knocks out an album that's already in there, and the chances of that are extremely slim. I mean, the newest newcomer is obviously Tool's Fear Inoculum that only came out
Last year.
last
Yeah.
August.
Okay, computer.
about,
would be
Oh,
another for me?
Okay.
I didn't even think of
Yeah. No, but
Radiohead. I mean,
Radiohead
we're all
is like,
taking "Have a Nice Day" by Bon Jovi, right? Like
No, Slippery When Wet. Slippery When
I'm
Wet.
leaving him on the dog. I don't think so.
by
I mean-
Bovine Jovi.
$40 million and Bovine Joni himself. Yeah.
Very central.
Yeah.
But that's why I wanted to bring that up, because our top 5 albums aren't necessarily a representation of where we are as players. Like the music that we enjoy listening to sometimes just doesn't even line up with.
I can't
what I was
play.
saying.
I can't play
Actually
fucking
play.
Witches Brew. You
It's kind
kidding me?
of where we
Exactly.
are with that.
Yeah.
You kidding me?
My top five
Hey,
albums
Jesse,
change
can you
from
play
day to
Bitches
day.
Brew for me?
No,
I
fuck
have to
no, you
say-
kidding me?
I totally get that.
For me, it's about the fact that like we do this for a living, and so it's like for me, they're all a reflection of what I want is to decompress. Usually, I spend a lot of time, like you said, like with teaching and then like learning cover tunes. There's a lot of interpretation. You have to be in a certain input, and then when I want to listen to stuff, it's usually things that you're like, for whatever reason, the kind of music it is like the least technical of that style you could find. And it's very much like you could tell everybody who's doing that is like improvising on instruments they don't regularly play. That's definitely the context with like soul coughing, or at the drive-in where everybody just grew up playing together. Nobody studied except for Omar Rodriguez, and everybody's just making it up as they go. And that fucking energy can't be, those backbeats they come up with are like no regular backbeat ever devised because they were just like, oh, wait, what, you know what I mean? Like those moments of like spending 8 hours in a garage forever.
I just
Which is
realized
another thing we covered on the
Didn't get
regular
5?
show.
Mm-hmm.
I think I only gave 4, right?
Are you pointing at that giant herpy or?
I gave like 8.
I thought OK Computer would have been the 5th one.
Oh no! If I had to
Oh,
pick
but
a 5th, it would be Hourglass. James Taylor.
If you had to
Oh.
pick one Radiohead album and that's all you had on that desert island, what would it be?
Oh, I don't do Radiohead, so I wouldn't know.
Oh man, this is gonna be
Yeah, but
tough.
do you
because you
listen
still
to
have to pick one. Then I'm gonna do you solid. I'm gonna
That wasn't
slide
the question.
Hail to the Thief. There you go.
You would not have perjured yourself in court if that was an actual legit question.
No.
I would challenge myself and go with Moonshaped Pool.
Really?
Yeah, because like you gotta understand, I listen to Radiohead so much.
Okay.
It's like if like just talking about it, like 5 songs went through my head and like all the parts and like when I think about the like learning on basic guitar, so many of them. It's like no, it's like I just did Knives Out and I did Amnesiac and I did
Yeah,
Optimistic.
I only
They all just
actually
ran
know
through my head.
only 2. I mean, obviously
B-sides
Creep
ran through my
and
head. Talk show host.
Optimistic. Just because we did it in test flight.
I'd have to say OK
That's a great
Computer
album.
because I bought that album from somebody that was going on tour years ago because they were selling a bunch of their albums, and I bought it and I haven't listened to it yet. And this was close
Mine's
to 10
still
years
dead,
ago
so-
now.
I do have to. I was gonna say, dude, the first time I heard the kick drum sound on High and Dry, I was like, oh my god,
Def Leppard.
how do I do that?
Right?
That is.
That's how I felt about that
incredible.
reverb tremolo guitar in Planet Telex. It was chicky, 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 chicky. I was like, what the fuck? Oh, so good.
Speaking of so good, this podcast was so good.
Oh, God.
See, the plane's up here and the runway's down here, and I just. Why am I
Just never landed once in the fucking simulator. Not
know.
one time.
They went, Jesse, the podcast is clear for landing. And you took that as like, no landing or anything.
Yeah, as Hunter S. Thompson says, you got to have a little bit of that adrenaline rush to clear out the old arteries, So
Yeah,
yeah,
damn,
what
not
a
even a
better
clean
way than just
segue.
an abrupt ending?
Yeah,
Always
fucking
did
do it.
everything by the book and on the up and up. So
Absolutely.
that's a great example.
So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
I think, it's hard to capture what we were doing on Zoom and do it on a podcast, but I think this is about as close as we can get it. And
It
Is
feels good to me.
there anything anybody wants to speak about coming up?
Yeah, now's the
Anything-
time for, the
interesting
self-aggrandizement
on
section.
horizons?
yeah.
We got a video coming out tomorrow, so I mean,
Well,
for those of you looking at this in the future,
that would
we
have
put
been
out a video.
That would have been a few days ago on
Covered all the
Saturday.
time.
It's already
last
out.
month on October 31st.
No, this will be out. This
Now
will
do
be
it
out
for
in a
next
few
year.
days. So,
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah,
Our
but what is
thing's
this
still
video?
gonna
Is
come
it-
out.
Out Monday.
What does the video pertain to, guys? Is it just you guys talking in a room or something better?
No,
It is, right?
It's a
your
rogue
band.
cover.
yeah.
It's a rogue cover.
It's,
Rogue
oh,
Oh,
exclamation
you're
point.
covering a Rogue song?
That'd
Again.
be bold.
Yeah, that'd be bold. No, it's our band Rogue, and we are doing a Halloween video because we've been doing videos for holidays. So
We did Dead Man's Party.
yeah,
Flag Day, Arbor Day. We know all of
Yeah.
that.
We had Macaulay
Yeah, all
come
the
in,
major
do
ones.
the
Yeah.
trombone, and had
Yeah.
some.
Macaulay McCulkin?
Yeah.
Mike Macaulay McCulkin.
Macaulay Columbus?
The hybrid man himself.
Yep.
What just happened?
Matt, do you have anything?
Let him know what's up.
I have a YouTube channel I'm planning to launch
Yeah.
That's it. Give us that saucy deep plug.
90% over my crippling self-doubt of even
Hey.
just putting a single video
Dude,
of myself playing.
it
Oh my
hurts
lord!
so
If
much.
you put it up, they will come all over.
Yeah, I will.
Hey, I'm still right there with you, man. I hate putting shit out. I still do.
Everybody,
I have to talk
dude,
myself
if you
into
put
it
up
every
videos,
single
like,
day.
I don't
Same.
mean to make it that kind of show for a minute, but people would be like, people be like, I'm a drum cuck because of Matt Lindsey. It just feels like I'm standing in the corner just
Matt.
while he's doing it to my wife, but my wife's my drums, man.
A buddy came over the other night and we were tracking some shit.
Glad I
And
got
we were
that
looking
out.
at some of my old videos that I was posting in like 2012,
Yeah,
2013.
yeah, right. I've been so well
And he
behaved.
told me, dude, no offense, but you are a way lesser player than you were then than you are now. And you had no problem putting that shit out then.
Yeah, fuck it.
Whoa, what?
You are so much better as a player now. Just put it out. Don't worry about the people that don't care about the content. You're putting shit out for the people that do care about the content.
Yeah.
You put out
You need your
videos
30,000
before.
followers.
You
sexy
put
man.
shit out on Danger Matt. Still, you put it out there, and you're a much better player now. Just don't fucking care about the likes. Don't care about how many people saw it. What I had to do for this next round, I just had to turn off all notifications from Facebook, Instagram, all of it. All I had to do was submit it, boom, there it is, and just walk away. I didn't check back in 10, 15 minutes to see like any engagements or shit. I just left it, and by like that night, I forgot that I posted anything at all. And that makes it so much fucking easier for me to not worry about people watching.
I gotta say,
Yeah, you gotta have that process, dude, for real.
Yep.
You gotta be able to just be okay with it, and
music,
that's cool.
Music school definitely kind of like stunted that for me. If there was one like negative thing I came away from music school with, it was this idea of the negative stigma being attached to social media
Yeah, fucking
musicians
sucks.
at the time.
Uh-huh.
And
Hate it.
you know the
But wasn't this like 100 years ago in like 2010 or
no,
whatever?
just
Yeah,
the whole
1858.
advent of this generation of players who have come up essentially just putting content on YouTube or Facebook, and
Yeah.
you know the idea of the drummer who's never played a gig has like 1 million followers and has never played a gig
Yeah.
or couldn't keep a gig, and just
Well, it's a gig in its own right.
yeah.
I mean, you
fair
know,
enough.
doing this content thing like we're doing on the level we're doing it at, it's a bit of
Just
work. It's
hearing-
definitely fun, but
hearing that level of judgment coming from some people that I looked up to quite a lot was a little damaging for me. And it's taken like some grit to get over that,
Word.
and to acknowledge that I may even lose face with some of the people that I respect the most in doing that.
what do you mean?
Something.
Well,
It's kind of an irrational fear
Uh-huh.
level of a thing, but it's something like I've
Oh,
grappled with.
like you mean like even to put out something now, like you're still concerned about like how they would like.
How it would come across.
Oh.
Yeah.
so keep on the lookout for that. We'll,
Matt.
That's
That's a
encouraging.
good segue.
I
Nice
know.
roll, bro. Nice tuck and roll.
no, but we know really good. We'll post that information in
Hell
the
yeah.
in the description.
Description shit.
I don't know. We've
I
never,
think we should put that at the front of the episode, though. that's like the intro before the bump.
we never
We never talked to each other.
No, we never did.
We never.
But we haven't
never hang out.
really talked about it yet. But
What are we
we
talking about?
have an EP that's going to come out at some point soon.
Sometime very soon.
And you actually hear the music at the end of every podcast,
Yeah,
at least
you
a
do.
little bit of it.
Little snippet.
That's you guys.
So
Yeah.
I don't think we have a date for it yet, but that will be coming out soon.
Good plug. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sick.
This
Yeah, I didn't know that.
podcast is in production under the Showcase, which is a VR production company that is in the works right now, and there's going to be a lot of content coming out for that.
Yep.
We're in cahoots with Oculus,
Nice.
and we're planning on getting a Christmas spectacular, immersive piece of content that's going to come out soon. It's going to feature gospel music, a play, a sick horn band, and some other stuff.
That's
So-
dope.
Just don't give them my Facebook profile. I refuse.
We will only put whatever is allowed for us to put on.
Yeah.
For
But keep on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
Jesse, you got anything?
No, that's pretty much it. Yeah, we're going to be coming at you in this podcast in virtual reality, so you can see my 5 o'clock shadow face double in real life.
We'll be shooting this in virtual reality
Oh,
at some
yeah.
point soon.
Really? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Dope.
That's the
So yeah, lots
so
of exciting.
people can twist my nipples and stuff like they've been saying they want to.
Absolutely.
Sure.
That's going to be on the Patreon page.
Fans only. And all that.
Yeah,
Only
that's
fans.
That's going to be the only interactive part of this podcast.
that's behind the
Just
paywall
this.
for sure.
Sick.
All right.
Sonic City Council only fans.
Yes. And speaking
It's
of
nasty
council,
behind that paywall.
this meeting is adjourned.
Ew. Ow.
Jesus. Can't have any of this.
You meant it.
Sonic City Council was created by Jesse Davidson and Davey Sipes and engineered by Max Taylor at Desert Sound Studio in Palmdale, California. Thank you to Disaster Cabinet for the outro music. Intro music written by Max Taylor. Sonic City Council is produced in association with Amped Music Academy and the Showcase Venue. For more information, visit theshowcasevenue.com.